Story 1. Don't contact us again. You're no longer our son, my dad texted. My sister laughed. I replied, perfect. My lawyer will send the bill with interest. Then the chat imploded with missed calls and screaming texts. Hey Reddit, get ready to hear this shit show of a family. I'm Nick, 31 male, and my folks cut me off via group text because I stopped being their personal piggy bank. So I hit them with $78,000 in loan repayment demands. What followed? Well, grab your popcorn. This is going to be fun. The text came through at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, while I was halfway through a gaming session with my buddy Derek. Family group chat. Dad, we're done. Don't contact us again. Consider yourself cut off. I picked up my phone, read it twice, then went back to my game. Derek noticed and asked what was up. I showed him the screen. Damn, he said. What did you do? Stopped writing checks. See, here's the thing about being the family bank. Eventually, you run out of sympathy for people who think your wallet is their emergency fund. My parents had been bleeding me dry for 6 years with what they called temporary loans. Loans that were never temporary and definitely never getting paid back. My sister Brielle saw the message and reacted with a laughing emoji. Then she typed, "About time someone said it." That told me everything. They'd had a whole family meeting about me. Sat around discussing how I was the problem while living off money I'd loaned them that they had no intention of returning. I could have typed out some long explanation, could have defended myself. Instead, I replied, "No problem. I'll have my lawyer send over the loan repayment notices tomorrow." With interest. The typing indicators started going crazy immediately. 3 dots appearing and disappearing like someone having a seizure. Then my phone started ringing. Mom, Dad, Brielle. Back to back to back. I declined every single one and silenced my phone. Derek looked at me with this mix of concern and respect. Dude, are you serious about the lawyer thing? Completely. How much are we talking? I pulled up my spreadsheet. Yeah, I kept a spreadsheet. $47,000 over the last 6 years. All formally documented with signed loan agreements. His eyes went wide. Holy! Yeah. And that's not counting the random small favors they conveniently forgot about. That's just the actual formal loans with paperwork. Here's what they never wanted anyone to know. I didn't just help them out here and there. I bankrolled their entire lifestyle for years while they pretended they were doing fine. Every major loan came with a promissory note. Every single one. Because my grandmother Helen taught me early that family or not, you document everything. Dad had borrowed $18,000 3 years ago for what he called a business investment opportunity. The business never materialized. The investment was apparently a fishing boat he used twice before selling it for half what I gave him. Never paid back a cent. Mom took out $12,000 for medical bills that turned out to be cosmetic procedures she didn't need and couldn't afford. Also never saw a dime back. Brielle, the professional makeup artist, had borrowed $17,000 over multiple loans for everything from equipment to rent to emergency car repairs. Her Instagram bio said CEO and founder of some makeup line that didn't exist outside of her bathroom mirror. She'd paid me back exactly $200 once, then asked for another $1,500 the next week. Those 3 major loans, 18, 12, and 17,000, made up the 47 grand I had documented with signatures and terms. There were other small amounts here and there over the years. Couple hundred for utilities, a few hundred for car insurance, but those were harder to prove and honestly, I didn't even care about that money anymore. The big stuff was enough. I'd been stupid. Not anymore. My phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree with texts. I glanced at a few of them while Derek watched. Mom, how can you be so cruel? We're family. Dad, you're going to destroy this family over money? Brielle, you're actually such a piece of garbage. Hope you know that. I showed Derek the messages. He shook his head. Man, they're really trying to flip this on you. That's what they do. It's what they've always done. The messages kept coming. Paragraphs about how disappointed they were, how I was being selfish, how they never thought I'd turn on them like this. Around midnight, Dad sent one more text. Your mother is crying. I hope you're happy. I typed back, tell her to dry her tears with one of the loan agreements she signed. Then I muted the group chat and went to bed. What they didn't know was that I'd had lunch with Grandma Helen 3 days ago, and I'd told her everything. The loans, the amounts, the complete lack of repayment or even acknowledgement, the constant guilt trips, the way they treated me like an ATM they could access anytime things got tight. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she asked me one question. Where do your parents live? I told her the address. And that's when she dropped the bomb. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Hey, hey, hey, that's my house." I didn't understand at first. Thought she meant she'd sold it to them years ago or something. But nope, she meant it was still hers. Legally. On paper. They'd been living there for 8 years without paying rent, property taxes, or utilities. Just existing in someone else's house like it was their God-given right. And that's when Grandma said something I'll never forget. "I think it's time they learned what life costs when someone's not paying it for them." That was 3 days ago. By tomorrow morning, everything was going to change. And they had no idea the storm that was coming. I showed up at Grandma Helen's place at 8 a.m. the next morning. She was already up, dressed, and had coffee waiting. "Sit," she said, pointing at the kitchen table. In front of her was an accordion folder that looked like it had survived a war. She pushed it across to me. "Everything you need is in there." I opened it. Inside were decades of documents, property deeds, tax statements, rental agreements that were never signed, payment records that showed exactly $0 received, and at the very bottom, loan agreements with my parents' signatures on them. Wait, loan agreements? I looked up at her. "You loaned them money too?" $31,200. Over 10 years. Her face didn't move. "They paid me back $800 total. Once, for my birthday. Like it was a gift." "No way." I felt my jaw clench. So it wasn't just me. They'd been running this scam on her for a decade, before they even started with me. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was stupid. I thought eventually they'd do the right thing. That something would click and they'd realize you can't just take and never give back." She took a sip of her coffee. "I was wrong. Some people don't learn. They just get better at justifying it." She walked me through the whole thing. Back in 2017, my parents were supposedly in a financial bind. Dad had quit another job, his third in 5 years, because he didn't vibe with the company culture. Mom had stopped working entirely, claiming chronic fatigue that somehow didn't prevent her from shopping or going to wine tastings. They'd asked Helen if they could stay in her rental property for a few months, just until they got back on their feet. She'd agreed, gave them a break on rent, said they could pay utilities and property taxes instead. That was 8 years ago. They'd never paid a single bill. Not one. Over time, they'd started acting like they owned the place. Renovated without asking. Planted gardens. Invited people over and called it their home. Helen had been too polite to push back. Too worried about causing family drama. But the loans were different. Those had paper trails. "I spoke with my attorney yesterday," she said. "Told him everything. He said we have grounds for immediate eviction based on breach of rental agreement and non-payment. But the loans?" She smiled. "Well, the loans give us leverage." She handed me another folder. This one had collection notices already drafted, legal demand letters, court filing templates, everything we needed to turn my parents' world upside down. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "We're going to file repayment demands for every loan, every single one. Yours and mine combined, that's $78,200. We're going to give them 30 days to either pay in full or set up a payment plan. And when they don't, then we file in court. We get judgments. We put liens on anything they own. And if they want to keep living in my house, they're going to start paying market rate rent, $3,000 a month." I did the math in my head. There was no way they could afford that. Dad's sporadic income and Mom's non-existent job meant they were barely scraping by even with me funding them. "They'll lose the house," I said. "Yes. And Brielle? She's been living there rent-free too. She can pay or leave." I sat back in my chair and smiled. For once, I wasn't the one solving their problems. I was the one holding all the cards. "There's something else," Helen said. She pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a Craigslist ad. Luxury downtown apartment available for short-term rental. $180 per night. Sleeps 4. Pet-friendly. The photos showed a place I recognized immediately. The exposed brick, the industrial lighting, the art on the walls. "That's Brielle's room," I said. "That's my house." Helen's voice could have frozen water. She's been renting out rooms on Craigslist and Airbnb, pocketing the money, not telling anyone. My hands clenched into fists. "How long?" "At least 18 months, maybe longer." My neighbor mentioned seeing different cars in the driveway at odd hours. Strangers coming and going. I didn't think much of it at first. Then I found the listings. She showed me more. Different ads, different platforms. Some listed it as cozy suburban retreat, others as artist's loft space, all featuring rooms in Helen's house, all managed by Brielle under fake names. Based on the booking history I could find, she's made at least $15,000 off this, Helen said. Probably closer to 20, all while claiming she's struggling and needs loans to survive. I felt rage building. What do you need me to do? Helen smiled again. That same look. Nothing yet. Just be ready. Because when we drop this on them, they're going to come at you hard. They're going to tell everyone you're tearing the family apart. Let them. I'm ready. Good. She closed the folders. The demand letters go out today. Legal eviction notice goes out tomorrow. After that, we wait and watch them scramble. I left her place feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not over them, but over my own life. By the afternoon, the certified letters would be delivered. By tomorrow, the eviction notice would be posted. And by next week, they'd realize they'd messed with the wrong people. Let the games begin. The letters hit around 3 p.m. 17 missed calls in 20 minutes, 6 voicemails, 34 texts. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about quarterly projections, watching my phone vibrate itself across the conference table. My boss looked at me with raised eyebrows. Everything okay? Family emergency, I said. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Opened the messages. Mom. What have you done? We got a letter from a lawyer. Call me now. Dad. If you think you're getting a cent from us, you're out of your mind. We're calling the police. Brielle. You're actually trying to sue us? You're seriously that petty? Hope you're proud. I scrolled through them all. Not one acknowledgement of the loans. Just outrage that I dared to ask for my money back. Then came a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Simon's attorney. Please have your lawyer contact me to discuss these frivolous claims. This is bordering on extortion. I screenshot it and sent it to Helen with a message. They hired a lawyer. She responded immediately. Good. Mine's better. Around 5 p.m., Derek met me at a diner near my apartment. I needed food and someone to vent to who wasn't going to tell me to work it out or think about family. So they got the letters, he said. And apparently asking for your money back is extortion now. He laughed. Man, your family is something else. They're about to find out what else I can be. I showed him the eviction notice Helen had sent. 30 days to vacate. Market rate rent or get out. Where are they going to go? Derek asked. Not my problem. Cold. I like that. He grinned. Wait, you don't know half of what they've done. I told him about the Craigslist rentals. How Brielle had been making money off Helen's house while crying poverty. How she'd borrowed thousands from me, claiming she couldn't make rent when she was literally profiting off someone else's property. Derek's face went from amused to disgusted. That's nasty. That's my sister. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from the extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Someone had started a group called Family Crisis and added everyone. Aunt Rose. Can someone explain what's happening? Maria called me crying. Uncle Jeff. I'm hearing lawyers are involved? Over what? Cousin Amy. Nick, why are you suing your parents? And there it was. The smear campaign had started. I typed out a response. I'm not suing anyone. I'm requesting repayment of documented loans per the signed agreements. If they'd like to discuss the $47,000 they owe me, I'm happy to talk. I attached a photo of one of the loan agreements. Dad's signature was clear as day. The amount, $18,000. The repayment terms, 24 months. The date, 3 years ago. The group went silent for a solid minute. Then Uncle Jeff. Holy... Cousin Amy. Wait, there are more? I sent another photo. Mom's loan, $12,000. Then Brielle's. $6,500 for emergency equipment. Then another of Brielle's. $4,200 for rent assistance. Uncle Jeff. What the heck? Then Dad jumped into the group. Those aren't loans. That was family helping family. We never agreed to pay that back. I screenshot his text and sent another photo. The loan agreement he'd signed. The part where it explicitly stated, borrower agrees to repay in full within 24 months. His signature at the bottom. Your signature says otherwise. Mom joined. You're twisting things. We were in crisis. You offered to help. Now you're using it against us. No, I offered loans. You agreed to terms. You never paid. That's called breach of contract. Brielle, you're actually doing this in front of everyone? You're such a vindictive jerk. Derek was reading over my shoulder, shaking his head. Dude, they're getting destroyed. Aunt Rose, I think we all need to take a breath here. Uncle Jeff, no, I want to see where this goes. Nick, how much do they actually owe? I replied, $47,000 from me, $31,200 from my grandmother, all documented loans with signatures. The group chat exploded, people taking sides, some saying I was being cruel, others saying if they signed agreements, they needed to pay. Then Helen joined the group. Grandma Helen. Since we're all here, let me clarify. My son and daughter-in-law have been living in my rental property for 8 years without paying rent, utilities, or property taxes. The agreed rent was $1,200 per month, which totals $115,200 in unpaid rent alone. Add utilities and annual property taxes of $3,600, $28,800 over 8 years, and we're looking at approximately $48,000 more in unpaid costs. Over $163,000 total in housing expenses they never covered. They were also given personal loans totaling $31,200, which were never repaid. An eviction notice has been filed. They have 30 days. Complete silence. Mom left the group chat. Then Dad. Then Brielle. The remaining family members started asking questions. I let them talk. Let them process. Then I dropped the final bomb. Also, Brielle has been illegally subletting rooms in Helen's house via Airbnb and Craigslist for profit without permission. We've documented at least $15,000 in unauthorized income over the past 18 months. I sent screenshots of the listings, the Craigslist ads, the Airbnb reviews. Cousin Amy. Brielle, seriously? Uncle Jeff. This is fraud. And just like that, the narrative shifted. They went from questioning me to realizing my family had been running scams on multiple people for years. My phone rang. Helen, you're enjoying this too much, she said. Maybe a little. Good. Don't stop now. They're going to play the victim. Don't let them. I won't. Meeting with my attorney tomorrow at 9. Be there. We're accelerating the eviction based on the subletting. They've got 2 weeks now, not 30 days. Perfect. I hung up and ordered another round of fries. Derek clinked his drink against mine. Here's to not being a doormat anymore. I'll drink to that. The next 2 weeks were psychological warfare. My parents went nuclear. First came the Facebook post. Mom wrote this long, dramatic thing about how her son had abandoned her in her time of need. How she'd sacrificed everything raising me, and this was how I repaid her. The post got attention. Friends from their church, old neighbors, distant relatives who didn't know the full story, they all commented with support. How could he? And family should come first, and I'm praying for you. I watched it from the sidelines, waiting. Then Helen struck back. She commented on Mom's post, with receipts. Maria, for clarity, you've lived in my home for 8 years without paying the agreed-upon rent. You borrowed $31,200 from me with signed agreements to repay within 3 years. Your daughter has been illegally subletting my property for profit. These are facts, not opinions. I've attached the documentation, and she actually did. Posted PDFs of the rental agreement, the loan paperwork, screenshots of Brielle's Airbnb account with earnings displayed. The comment section went from supportive to hostile in minutes. People started asking Mom questions she couldn't answer. Someone called her a scammer. Someone else said they were reporting the Airbnb fraud to the IRS. Mom deleted the post an hour later. But screenshots live forever. Cousin Brian had saved it and shared it in the family group with the caption, "In case anyone missed this." Next came the guilt trips. Personal, targeted, brutal. Dad called me from a number I didn't have blocked. I answered by mistake. "You're killing your mother," he said. No hello, just that. The stress is too much. If something happens to her, it's on you. Then maybe she should have thought about that before borrowing money she had no intention of repaying. We were going to pay you back. When? In what universe were you going to come up with $47,000? Silence. That's what I thought, I said. Anything else? You used to be a good person. What the heck happened to you? I still am. You're just mad I'm not a doormat anymore. I hung up. Brielle tried a different approach. She sent me a message claiming she was getting death threats from crazy people online because of what I'd done. Said she was scared to leave the house. Said she might hurt herself if this continued. I screenshot her message and sent it to Helen with a note. Manipulation or genuine concern? Helen replied, manipulation. She's been posting Instagram stories at restaurants all week. I checked. She was right. Brielle's stories showed her out with friends, drinking cocktails, living life. The whole I'm scared thing was theater. I sent her one message back. You still owe $17,000. She didn't respond. The eviction process moved forward. 2 weeks to vacate. Helen's attorney was ruthless. When my parents tried to claim they had tenant rights and couldn't be forced out on short notice, he dropped a folder of evidence showing the illegal subletting, pointed out that running an unauthorized rental business from someone else's property voided any tenant protections they thought they had. They had no legal ground to stand on. The judge approved the eviction. 2 weeks, final. That's when things got personal. I came home from work one day to find my apartment door scratched up. Someone had keyed traitor into the metal. Building security footage showed Brielle, wearing sunglasses and a hood, doing it at 2 a.m. I filed a police report, added it to the growing pile of evidence. Then Mom showed up at my work. She walked into the office, asked for me at reception, and when I came down, she tried to make a scene. "Please," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't do this. We'll lose everything." I kept my voice calm and low. "No, Mom. You need to leave. We're family. Family forgives. Family don't steal from each other." "How dare you? We didn't steal. You gave—" "I loaned. Security. Security showed up and escorted her out. My boss pulled me aside later and asked if I needed to take personal time. I told him I was fine." The family group chat had splintered into factions. Some people supported me. Others thought I was being too harsh. Most just stayed silent and watched the train wreck unfold. Uncle Jeff reached out privately. "I've been thinking about all those times they asked me for money. Never gave it to them. Always felt guilty. Not anymore." Cousin Amy sent me a message. "Brielle asked to borrow $3,000 from me last year. I said no. She never spoke to me again. Now I know why." The support was quiet but real. Then, a week before the eviction date, my parents made their final play. They hired a new lawyer, some flashy guy who specialized in family disputes. He sent a letter threatening to sue me for emotional distress, for elder abuse, for financial coercion. Helen's attorney laughed when he read it. "They've got nothing. This is a Hail Mary. Should I be worried? Only if you're worried about wasting 30 minutes in court watching their case get dismissed." The eviction was happening in 6 days. The court date for the loan repayment was scheduled for 2 weeks after the eviction. Everything was falling into place. Then I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Nick, this is Colleen, your dad's sister, Aunt Colleen. I hadn't talked to her in years. She'd moved to Oregon and dropped out of the family orbit. Hey, I heard what's happening. I want you to know, you're doing the right thing. Thanks." "No, I mean it. Your father did the same thing to our parents. Borrowed money, never paid it back, acted like it was owed to him. I stopped talking to him because of it. Your grandmother bailed him out more times than you know." My stomach dropped. "I didn't know that." "That's because they don't talk about it. They bury it. They make you feel crazy for remembering. But you're not crazy. You're doing what I should have done years ago." We talked for 20 minutes. She told me stories I'd never heard. How Dad had conned his own mother multiple times. How he'd borrowed from her friends. How he'd always positioned himself as the victim. It wasn't just me. It was a pattern. And now I understood why Helen snapped too. This wasn't about revenge. This was about breaking a cycle. The morning of the eviction, I didn't go to the house. Helen didn't either. We sent her attorney and a sheriff's deputy to handle it. I was at work trying to focus on a project when my phone started buzzing. Group chat activity. Extended family texting. Everyone knew what was happening today. Around noon, Helen's attorney called. "It's done. They're out. Left about an hour ago. Any issues? Your sister threw a makeup palette at the deputy. Missed. Other than that, no." I almost laughed. "Of course she did. Property's empty now. Your grandmother's getting the locks changed this afternoon." "What did they take?" "Everything they could fit in a U-Haul. Left some furniture, trash everywhere, couple holes in the walls. Standard spite. Are we documenting it? Already done. Photos, video, the works. If they try to claim they left it in good condition, we've got proof otherwise. They were out. It was real." My phone buzzed. Message from an unknown number. "We're homeless because of you. If anything happens now, it's all your fault." Blocked. They were cycling through phones, trying to get to me. I blocked 4 numbers in 10 minutes. Then came a call from Aunt Rose. "Nick, I just talked to your mother. They're in a motel. They don't have anywhere to go. They had 8 years to figure out housing. She's saying they can't afford first month's rent anywhere. That they're going to end up on the street. They should have thought about that before refusing to pay their debts. Can't you just—" "No. Rose, with all due respect, they owe me $47,000. They owe Helen $31,200. They've been living rent-free for 8 years. They've borrowed and stolen and manipulated their way through life, and it finally caught up with them. I'm not the villain here." Silence. "I know," she finally said. I feel bad." "So do I. But feeling bad doesn't change what they did." She sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry for calling." Over the next 3 days, I got texts from 7 different numbers. All variations of blame, threats, guilt trips. I documented every one and forwarded them to Helen's attorney. "This is harassment," he said. "We can file for a restraining order if you want." "Not yet. Let's see if they burn themselves out first. Your call, but the moment it escalates, we move." 2 weeks after the eviction, The court date for the loan repayment arrived. I took the day off work and met Helen outside the courthouse. Inside, my parents sat on the opposite side of the room with their lawyer. Mom looked worn down. Dad looked furious. Brielle wasn't there. When the judge called the case, both sides presented their evidence. Then the judge asked, "Do you have documentation stating these were gifts?" Their lawyer shuffled papers. "Your Honor, this was a family matter. The expectation was documentation. Yes or no?" "No, Your Honor, but then they're loans. Do you dispute the signatures on these agreements?" Dad leaned forward. "Those were signed under duress." "What duress?" "We were desperate. Being desperate doesn't negate a contract. Do you have evidence of coercion? Threats? Anything that would invalidate these agreements?" Silence. The judge looked at our attorney. "What are you seeking?" "Full repayment of $78,200 combined, plus interest and legal fees. If unable to pay in full, we request a court-ordered payment plan with automatic wage garnishment to ensure compliance." The judge nodded. "Granted. Defendants will repay the full amount at $800 per month until satisfied. Wage garnishment will be initiated if payments are missed. Court fees to be split between parties." The look on their faces was priceless. Their lawyer tried to argue, but the judge wasn't having it. We walked out of that courtroom with a legal win. $800 a month, automatically taken from their income. Beautiful. Helen looked at me as we reached the parking lot. "How do you feel?" "Like I finally got my spine back." She smiled. "Good, because we're not done yet." "What do you mean?" "There's still the matter of the illegal subletting. I've filed a separate civil suit for lost income. That goes to court next month." I blinked. "How much are you going for?" "Whatever we can prove plus damages. Could be $20,000 or more from Brielle." "Damn, Grandma." "I told you, I'm done being nice." We parted ways, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. But the next morning, I woke up to 50 missed calls and a voicemail from Mom that made my stomach turn. "Nick, your father's in the hospital. He collapsed last night. The doctor says it's stress-related. If he dies, it's because of you. I hope you can live with that." I stared at my phone, feeling my gut twist. Then I called Helen. "I got the same message," she said. "It's bait. Don't take it." "Should I go to the hospital?" "Do you want to?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No." "Then don't." I didn't. I went to work. I lived my life. And when people asked if I'd heard about Dad, I said yes and left it at that. 3 days later, Dad was released from the hospital. Stress-induced panic attack. Not a heart attack. Not life-threatening. The guilt trip didn't work. And that's when they realized they'd lost. Losing the court case broke something in them. For the first time in their lives, they couldn't manipulate their way out. The $800 monthly garnishment hit their accounts immediately. Automatic. Unavoidable. Dad had picked up work at a warehouse. Mom was doing data entry from whatever apartment they'd managed to scrape together. Brielle had moved in with some guy she met on a dating app, another temporary host she'd drain until he got wise. But the damage was spreading beyond just the money. The extended family wasn't buying their victim act anymore. Aunt Rose stopped returning Mom's calls. Uncle Jeff blocked Dad after he tried to borrow just $500 to get through the month. Cousin Amy publicly called Brielle out on Facebook for trying to sell her a makeup service while still owing me 17 grand. Their social circle imploded. People from church stopped inviting them to events. Old friends got quiet. Then Helen's civil suit against Brielle went to court 3 weeks after the loan repayment judgment. I attended. Her argument was that she'd been sharing the space with friends, and any money exchanged was contributions to household costs. Helen's attorney dropped a stack of printed Airbnb reviews, Craigslist conversations, and Venmo transactions showing $19,400 in documented rental income over 18 months. The judge looked at Brielle. "You operated an unlicensed rental business from property you didn't own, pocketed the income, and now claim it was just friends helping out? I was trying to survive by committing fraud. Judgment for the plaintiff. $19,400 plus damages and legal fees. Wage garnishment authorized." Brielle stormed out of the courtroom. After the hearing, I went back to work, back to my life. The chaos was still happening around me, but I wasn't in it anymore. I was an observer, not a participant. 2 months after the eviction, I heard through my cousins that Brielle's boyfriend kicked her from his place, and she's been sleeping in her car. Sucks to suck. The garnishments kept hitting, every month, like clockwork. They tried to fight it twice, filed motions to reduce the payments, claimed financial hardship. Both times, the judge denied them, said they'd signed contracts and now they'd honor them. 4 months after the court judgment, they'd paid back $3,200 of the combined $78,200. At this rate, It'd take over 8 years to repay everything. 8 years of being legally bound to the consequences of their choices. And I was fine with that. Grandma and I met for lunch one afternoon. She looked good, lighter, less stressed. She'd renovated the house after they'd left, turned it into an actual rental property with real tenants who paid on time. How's it feel? I asked. Liberating. She sipped her coffee. I spent so long trying to help them, trying to be the supportive mother, the understanding grandmother. All it did was enable them to get worse. You did the right thing. So did you. Don't forget that. When they come crawling back, and they will, don't forget what they did. Don't forget how they treated you. I won't. But I didn't believe they'd come crawling back. They were too proud, too stubborn, too committed to their victim narrative. I was wrong. 6 months after the eviction, my phone rang on a Saturday evening. Unknown number. Nick? Mom's voice. Small. Broken. What? How are you, son? Don't call me that. What do you want? She paused, then said, Can we talk? In person? No. Please, I'm asking. I don't have anything to say to you. Then just listen. That's all I'm asking. She kept ranting for like 2 minutes and asking me to meet. I should have said no, but curiosity won, I guess. So, I agreed to meet her tomorrow. The next day, I showed up early at some coffee shop, grabbed a corner table where I could see the door. Derek had offered to come as backup, but I told him I'd be fine. Mom walked in at 12:03. She looked rough, face worn. She'd aged 5 years and 6 months. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond, just waited. Then after the awkward silence, she finally spoke. I wanted to apologize. Okay, we were wrong. About everything. The loans, the house, the way we treated you, all of it. I leaned back. What do you want? Nothing. I needed to say it. You said it. Anything else? She looked down at her hands. Your father and I are separating. That caught me off guard. What? We can't afford to live together anymore. The garnishments, the rent, everything. We're drowning. We are blaming each other the whole time. It's over. I'm sorry. I wasn't. Brielle's pregnant. She doesn't know who the father is. She's asking us for help, but we don't have anything to give her. Again, not my problem. I know. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just thought you should know. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she spoke again. Quieter. You were right. About everything. We used you. We took advantage. And when you finally stood up for yourself, we tried to destroy you for it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What we did. I studied her face, looking for the manipulation, the angle, but all I saw was exhaustion. Is that it? That's it. I stood up. Thanks for the apology. But it doesn't change anything. You still owe me $47,000. The garnishment continues until it's paid. That's how this works. I understand. Do you? Because for years, you acted like consequences didn't apply to you. Like you could just cry and guilt trip your way out of anything. Now you're learning that's not how the world works. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. I walked out. 2 weeks later, Dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Nick, I know you don't want to talk to me. I get it. But I'm calling to ask, no, to beg. Your grandmother cut me off completely. Won't answer my calls. I made mistakes. I know I did. But she's my mother. Can you talk to her? Tell her I'm sorry? I didn't respond. Helen called me that evening. Your father left me 5 voicemails. I know. He asked me to talk to you. What did you say? Nothing. Deleted it. Good. She paused. He's not getting back in. Ever. I want to be clear about that. I spent 40 years enabling him, bailing him out, making excuses. I'm not doing it anymore. And if that makes me a bad mother, I'll live with that. You're not a bad mother. You're actually amazing. So are you, kid. We hung up, and I sat on my couch taking in the weight of the last 6 months. The chaos, the legal battles, the family implosion, and I felt good. Not in a vindictive way. Not in a, ha-ha, they're suffering way. Just free. For years, I'd carried their problems, their debt, their dysfunction. And the moment I put it down, they tried to make me feel guilty for not picking it back up. But I didn't. And I wouldn't. Christmas came and went. And I spent it with Helen and some cousins who'd sided with us through the mess. No drama, no tension, just food and laughter and quiet. The garnishments continued, month after month, like clockwork. By the 1-year mark, they'd paid back $9,600. Barely a dent, but progress. Helen kept the house rented. She was making more in 1 month than my parents had contributed in 8 years. Me? Started dating someone Derek introduced me to. Bought a new car. Lived my life without the constant background noise of other people's crises. And every month when that $800 hit my account from the garnishment, I transferred it straight to savings. Not because I needed it, but because it was a reminder. A reminder that family isn't a free pass to use people. A reminder that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop carrying weight that isn't yours. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Story 2. My golden sister sent a meme in the family chat. Freelance coding equals unemployed gamer, mocking me. A month later, her bar license was gone, and so was my parents' pride. Hey Reddit. So a while back, my sister Rachel, 29 female, made a meme about me, Josh, 31 male, being a freelance coder equals unemployed gamer, and shared it in the family group chat. Everyone laughed. Nobody defended me. I left the chat without a word. Fast forward a few weeks, and guess who's blowing up my phone because something urgent happened and now suddenly my skill set matters? What started as her trying to use me ended with a full-on meltdown involving lawyers, lies, and some beautiful karma I didn't even have to lift a finger for. You're gonna love this one, it gets messy. You ever look at your phone and just know it's about to piss you off? That was me last Tuesday. I work as a freelance software developer, so while I was eating leftover Chinese, fixing a broken contact form for a client whose website looked like it time-traveled from 2007 when I got a ping from the family group chat. Now for context, this chat was always a mess. Daily good morning gifts from my mom, recycled quotes about hustle from my dad, and my sister Rachel dropping random screenshots of her accomplishments, like she's running her own press release campaign. Aunt Janice sending those stupid Minions memes. So half the time, I'd mute the chat and move on. But this one? This one hit different. It was a meme. Cartoon drawing of some scruffy dude in a hoodie, Cheeto dust on the keyboard, surrounded by empty energy drink cans. Caption said, freelance coding equals unemployed gamer. My name was tagged. Twice. And just to hammer it in, Rachel added, Lamau had to share. You doing okay over there, Josh? Then my mom hit it with the laughing emoji. Dad commented, so true, haha. And my cousin Emily dropped in a Kevin Hart laughing gif like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. I didn't respond. No point. I just left the chat. Quietly, no dramatic exit message, no, you'll regret this. Just tapped leave conversation, and that was that. Not because I was mad. I mean, yeah, it annoyed me. But mostly, I just wasn't going to waste another bite of my bandwidth on people who still think working for a law firm means success. And building your own business means you're one bad day away from streaming Fortnite for rent money. Rachel's been the golden child since forever. Straight A's, honor society, then law school. The family basically threw a graduation week for her. Custom cake, photo shoot, the whole deal. When I got certified in front-end development and picked up my first real client, crickets. Dad called it a phase. Mom asked if I was still doing that computer thing. Rachel joked I should put digital handyman on my business card. So no, I didn't leave because I was hurt. I left because I'm not sticking around for a roast session I didn't RSVP to. It's not about ego. It's about self-respect. I grew up being the kid who built his own PC at 13 while everyone else was doing sports or taking dance lessons. I liked figuring out why things didn't work and fixing them without needing to ask anyone for help. But back then, that made me antisocial or lazy, according to my family. Rachel? She was giving fake court presentations in the living room at 10 years old, wearing mom's blazer, and using her stuffed animals as a jury. They ate it up. Our little lawyer. Every time she talked, they acted like she was curing cancer. Every time I fixed the Wi-Fi or helped mom's friend reset her email password, I was just the kid who's good with gadgets. By the time I hit 20, I stopped trying to impress anyone. I freelanced, worked on contracts that actually paid well, and slowly built a client list. I didn't post about it, didn't rub it in anyone's face. I just worked, quietly, because I figured success talks loud enough on its own, eventually. Apparently not loud enough for them to hear through Rachel's nonstop bragging about her bar exam and LinkedIn followers. So, yeah, that meme? That was the moment I knew there wasn't any winning them over. They weren't laughing because they misunderstood me. They were laughing because that's how they chose to see me. The lesser sibling. The joke. So I bounced. No big speech. No rage texting. Just done. Later that night, I kept thinking about it. Not the meme itself, but how casual it was for them. Like they didn't even hesitate. The same way they don't hesitate to praise Rachel for everything, including stuff I low-key helped her with. Yeah, that's a fun little detail. She once called me up, all panicked, because her firm's internal portal was glitching during a live meeting. I fixed the CSS and JavaScript on the spot. Never asked for a thank you. Just did it because, well, I'm not petty. But guess who claimed she figured it out herself during her next team call? So nah, I'm not mad. I'm not bitter. I'm just done playing team mascot for a family that only claps when the lawyer talks. I screenshotted the meme. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I like keeping receipts, especially for stuff like this. It's weirdly motivating, like a digital version of they'll see. I went back to work, 3 tickets in my inbox, one from a client asking if I could build a custom widget for tracking bookings, another wanting help fixing a broken WordPress site. It was a good day. Quiet, productive. No memes, no fake smiles, just code and coffee and peace. And you know what? That meme was the best thing they could have done for me. Because now I know exactly where I stand. And unlike them, I'm not pretending. They can fake whatever they want. Status, closeness, even that tight-knit family image they post online for likes. I'm not playing that game. I don't need their approval. I've got invoices that speak louder. So imagine my lack of surprise when I got a text from Rachel 5 days later. No, hey. No, how are you? Nothing resembling humility. Just straight panic. Rachel, I need your help. It's urgent. I think someone hacked my files. Something important might get leaked. I stared at the message for a solid 10 seconds, blinked, then laughed. Out loud. Alone in my room. Like a crazy person. This was the same person who called me a basement tech guy in front of my dad's coworkers last Thanksgiving because I wore a hoodie instead of a blazer. Now she's got urgent tech problems, and suddenly I exist? I didn't reply. Not right away. I screenshotted it and went back to my work. Had a payment gateway integration to test. Her crisis didn't even make my top 5 for the day. She doubled down the next morning. Rachel, I'm serious. These files are confidential. I could get in trouble. You know this stuff. I really need you. Then a second text, 30 seconds later. Rachel, I'm not asking you to fix everything. Just look into it. You're not even working a real job anyway. There it was. That last line, man. That's what made it fun. I could practically hear her voice in my head. Smug, dismissive, like asking me for help was a favor she was doing me. The unemployed gamer has nothing better to do, right? So I responded, you want professional help? You'll need to pay my professional rate. Short? Director? Civil? No sarcasm even. I was proud of myself, honestly. She didn't like that. Rachel. Wow. Seriously? You're charging your own sister? Rachel. You'd really let me get into trouble just because of a joke? Ah, yes. That's all it ever was. A harmless little joke. I replied, I'm not letting you get in trouble. You are. Then muted her. 3 hours later, my mom called. I let it ring twice, then answered. I already knew the tone she'd use. That soft, performative, guilt-laced voice. The one she breaks out when someone's in the hospital or when she needs a ride to the airport at 4 a.m. Josh, she started, your sister's going through something serious. You really can't just help her out? I took a breath. She said I wasn't working a real job, remember? So this unemployed gamer's busy playing on his keyboard right now. Don't be petty. I wasn't. I was billing. She's your sister, Mom continued. Like that was some sort of universal override code. And I'm your son, I shot back. Funny how that only matters when Rachel needs something. She sighed like I was being difficult. Like I wasn't the one being asked to clean up a mess for free while being disrespected for doing it. That's the thing with people like them. They want the benefits of your skills without the respect for your work. They think love equals unpaid labor. What made it funnier? She'd already tried going to other people. I found out later she hit up 2 of her firm's real tech guys in her network she used to brag about. One told her it had cost $1,200, no shortcuts. The other wanted $500 just to open the files. No handouts. No fake sibling discounts. So she circled back to me thinking I'd jump in for free just because we share a last name. Like I was still the kid fixing her printer in exchange for pizza. She's nervous, Josh, my mom said. She should be, I replied. Confidential files? Legal career? Those consequences aren't a joke. Mom went quiet for a second. Then she dropped the line she always uses when she's losing an argument. You've always been jealous of her. There it was. The classic fallback. Not, you're right. Not, we've been unfair. Just the same lazy narrative they've leaned on since we were kids. Rachel the star, Josh the problem. Doesn't matter how many clients I've helped or how well my business is doing. In their eyes, success only counts if it's in a courtroom or on a LinkedIn headline. I'm not jealous, I said calmly. I'm just done being treated like the family tech support with no salary. She didn't respond. Just said, fine, then hung up. No goodbye. That night, I went to bed in the same hoodie she once made fun of. Comfortable, stress-free, and completely at peace with my decision. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Screenshots. Everywhere. Rachel's files had leaked. And not just any files. We're not talking contracts or legal memos. We're talking screenshots of affair convos, personal messages, explicit stuff, stuff that had names, timestamps, even a few office-related references. Apparently, she'd been mentoring one of her clients a little too intimately. And the thing is, my sister is married, so she was having an affair. Suddenly, every mutual connection was whispering. The group chat I'd left? Silent. My mom didn't call. Rachel didn't text. No one asked me for help anymore. I sat at my desk sipping cold coffee, watching it all unfold like a spectator at a game I didn't buy tickets for. I didn't laugh. I didn't post anything. I just opened my notes app and wrote 3 words. I warned her. Not directly, not dramatically, but in every way that mattered. I told her months ago her passwords were lazy. That storing sensitive crap in Google Drive folders named Do Not Open One wasn't exactly Fort Knox. She rolled her eyes. Told me. Not everyone needs to be a paranoid neckbeard. All right then. Now her important legal files were all over the place. But not for the reasons she claimed. It wasn't client contracts or confidential firm stuff. Nope. Turned out those leaked files were screenshots of explicit messages between her and one of her married clients. Texts, photos, even a dumb audio note where she called him daddy and joked about billing their flirty chats under consulting hours. Professional, right? The screenshots had names, timestamps, her work email right in the corner. She didn't even bother using a burner. Just raw stupidity uploaded straight to the cloud. By noon, they were circulating everywhere. Someone dumped them anonymously to a private legal group. Someone else posted them in a group chat from her alma mater. And then, of course, it made its way into the local legal gossip circle. To make things worse, one of the messages literally had her law firm's name in it. Let's keep this quiet. My firm would flip if they saw this. Oh yeah? You think? I sat at my desk refreshing a dashboard for a client's e-commerce backend while watching her reputation slide into a ditch in real time. My phone buzzed a few times. One from a high school friend. Yo, is that your sister trending on Legal Mess? Another, didn't she always call you unemployed? Yep, same one. What really blew me away was how fast it escalated. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was potential disbarment territory. Some people even started speculating about who the guy was, whether it was a client she represented. If it was, then she might have crossed ethical boundaries that go beyond oopsie territory. And then came the cherry on top. Someone leaked that she was under internal review at her firm for conduct-related issues. Translation? They were trying to figure out how fast they could cut her loose without catching stray shrapnel. Around 3 p.m., I got the first real message from her since the whole thing started. Rachel, what did you do? No hi, no help, just straight-up accusation. I stared at it. The irony was unbelievable. She begged me to help her, refused to pay, and now she thought I leaked her affair screenshots out of revenge? Nah, I'm not that bored. I did nothing, which is still more than you deserved. Didn't even get a reply. Just a status update from her on WhatsApp that said, people will lie when they feel threatened. Right, sure, you're the victim here. You're the victim. By evening, her husband had gone full ghost mode, deleted his social media, removed their wedding pics from his profile, updated his bio to just say, forward. Coldest move I've seen since someone rage quit a Dota match. The dude had a reputation for being low-key, never into drama. So watching him act like she was dead to him told me everything I needed to know. She didn't just screw up. She torched her own house and expected the rest of us to hold the hose. And then, just when I thought it was winding down, I got a call from a burner number. I don't usually answer unknowns, but I was feeling curious. It was her husband. Hey man, he said. Not trying to start anything. I know you do tech stuff, and I need to know. Did you leak that? His voice wasn't angry, just tired. The kind of tired you hear from people who've been lied to in stereo. No, I told him. She came to me asking for help. I told her I'd do it, for a price. She refused. Then it leaked. I had nothing to do with it. He was quiet. Then he said, I believe you. Just needed to hear it. We didn't talk after that. But later that night, he posted a picture of their dog on Instagram with the caption, she got the law degree. I got the better loyalty. I don't care who you are. That's peak poetic justice. Meanwhile, I kept working. Because unlike her, I actually had clients. I wasn't just surviving. I was scaling. I even had a local HVAC guy refer me to one of his business buddies who needed custom backend work done for scheduling installs. He said, I told him you're the guy that doesn't mess around. That one sentence did more for me than anything my family ever said. The family group chat? Still quiet. No one reached out. No damage control. Not even from mom. Guess they were busy cleaning up the mess made by the kid they said had direction. Around midnight, I got one last message from Rachel. Rachel, you're loving this, aren't you? I didn't answer. I just archived the chat. I wasn't loving it. I wasn't even celebrating. This wasn't a win for me. It was just another reminder that the people who looked down on me for years were the same ones begging for my help when things got real. And I had the receipts to prove it. I backed up all her messages, organized the timestamps, and saved them in a folder titled In Case of Blame Game. Because if I've learned anything about people like her, it's that they don't take losses quietly. They look for someone to drag down with them. But this time, I wasn't anywhere near the blast zone. I'd spent years being the emotional crash pad for everyone in that family. The guy they'd mock on Monday and ask for help on Tuesday. But not anymore. This time, I was just the guy watching it all burn from a safe, well-insulated distance, with receipts, backups, and a secure folder marked Not My Problem. Rachel, meanwhile, was in freefall. First, the law firm. Apparently, the moment the screenshots made it to their inbox, they went full CYA mode. Internally, they labeled it misconduct concerns. Externally, radio silence. Not even a PR patch job. Just a quiet scrubbing of her name from the firm's website, like she never existed. Second, the clients. I recognized one of them. He'd been at a few of her "look who I'm representing" dinners my parents were weirdly proud of. A guy who owned several properties and used Rachel for contract work. The moment the scandal hit, he pulled his files and hired someone else. He didn't even call to say goodbye. Just dropped a review online that said, unreliable, would not recommend. Then came the personal collapse. Her husband went full ice mode, changed the locks, took the car, and according to one of my friends who still live near them, gave away her Peloton for free on Craigslist. And just when I thought the fallout had peaked, I got a knock on my door. It was mom and dad. Now, I live in a modest apartment about 15 minutes from their house. They rarely visit unless they need something, or they've run out of people willing to put up with them. So when I opened the door and saw them standing there with that weird, overly nice smile, I already knew this wasn't about catching up. Can we talk? Mom asked. I stepped aside. Sure, shoes off. They sat down stiff like they were visiting a parole officer. Dad cleared his throat like he was about to start a PowerPoint. Your sister's going through a rough time, he said. I nodded. Yeah, apparently she's been going through people too. Mom winced. Josh, please. She said I'd be nothing, I reminded them. That freelancing was code for unemployment. That I was just lucky if someone needed a cheap website. I remember that, do you? They shifted. Neither made eye contact. We're not here to relive old fights, Dad said, in his favorite neutral voice. We're here to ask for your help. I raised a brow. You mean the same help she refused to pay for? Silence. She's being investigated. The bar association might get involved. She could lose her license, Mom finally said. She leaked her own affair texts, I replied. The only thing I did was say no. She says you manipulated them, Dad said. I laughed. Loud. The kind of laugh that makes people uncomfortable. Then she should sue me. Oh, wait. She probably will. She's scared, Mom said again. She should have been scared before she hit send, I replied. Then came the real reason they were there. The guilt wasn't working, so they moved to their go-to play. Manipulation by responsibility. We just need you to clarify a few things, Dad said, reaching into his folder. He handed me a letter. It was already signed by Rachel. A drafted statement claiming the screenshots were faked, possibly by a family member with access to her cloud credentials. They wanted me to sign it too. I blinked. You're asking me to admit I faked a scandal to ruin my sister's life? On paper? Dad nodded like he was handing me a grocery list. It's just to calm things down. No one's going to check the details. Mom jumped in, arms folded. You don't even have a reputation to protect, Josh. She does. Be reasonable. I stared at them. You're actually saying I have nothing to lose? She's a lawyer, Mom snapped. She built something. You work from your laptop. You could recover. That's the dumbest logic I've ever heard, I said. You want me to lie so she can keep pretending to be better than me? We're not asking you to lie, Dad said. We're asking you to support your sister. I laughed again. This is support? You want me to burn myself to keep her warm. You always twist things, Mom barked. This is why no one takes you seriously. You act like the world owes you something just because you didn't get enough attention as a child. I stood up. You can take the letter and leave. You can take. And Dad frowned like I disappointed him in a spelling bee. You're being emotional. No, I said. I'm being done. Mom grabbed her purse like it personally offended her. I hope you're happy when she loses everything. She lost it the second she treated me like trash and expected me to play janitor. They walked out stiff and muttering. Right before the door closed, Dad said, "You've always had a chip on your shoulder." I opened it back up. Yeah, and it's gotten me farther than your approval ever did. That night, I got a text from Rachel. Rachel, you always wanted to watch me fall. You finally got your wish. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened an email from a new client, a property manager who needed back-end support for a housing site. Said he found me through a referral from a real estate agent. Heard you're the guy who gets things done without the drama. I accepted the contract. The next morning, I got an unexpected DM on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, her former law school roommate. Hey, don't know if you heard, but Rachel's been suspended. Word is she's blaming you. There it was. I'd been expecting it. The pivot. The scapegoat move. She didn't just fall. She needed to drag someone with her. And since I was the one who said no, I became the villain in her little courtroom play. That afternoon, I got another message from a company that Rachel had applied to before all this. Their hiring manager had seen the drama online and reached out to me directly. Would you be willing to consult with us instead? We'd love to work with someone reliable. I said yes. The new client was clean-cut, professional, and didn't care about the noise. We saw your code samples and the feedback from Elm Creek Realty, he said over Zoom. You're clearly the guy for the job. That was it. No drama, no digging, just respect. But while I was debugging their tenant portal, Rachel was on a different kind of mission. Damage control through deflection. The official legal notice hit my inbox 3 days later. Subject: cease and desist. Notice of intent to pursue legal action. My first reaction? Laughed so hard I almost knocked over my coffee. The document was a badly structured PDF with her firm's letterhead, probably a leftover from her office, and full of legal jargon strung together like it came from a template generator. It still had the Microsoft Word formatting lines visible, like she saved it in a rush and forgot to export clean. Real professional stuff from someone trying to restore her reputation. She was suing me for defamation, intentional emotional distress, and get this, malicious sabotage of professional standing. I scrolled to the bottom. Claimed damages? $120,000. Yep, she actually tried to sue me for 6 figures because she embarrassed herself and wanted someone else to wear it. I forwarded the document to my attorney, a chill guy named Ellis I've worked with for years. Dude's built like a bouncer, talks like a barista. He read it, then sent me a voice memo that started with, "Bro!" and ended with, "We're going to eat her alive." We filed a formal response, denied everything, and submitted a motion to dismiss with prejudice. Attached? A carefully labeled folder with screenshots of her asking me for help, her refusing to pay, her admitting it was urgent, me refusing her, accusing me afterward. We also included metadata logs showing I never accessed her files, because I didn't. I couldn't have leaked what I never touched. What made it even better? Her Google Drive folder wasn't locked down. It had been shared with 3 people total, none of them me. But guess who was on that list? Yep, the guy she was swapping consulting hour pillow talk with. His personal Gmail, plain as day. That alone nuked her whole argument. If someone leaked it, it was either her or her boy toy. I wasn't even in the building, let alone the suspect lineup. The court date landed 2 weeks out. In that time, I didn't respond to her. I didn't engage with my parents either. Mom tried calling once. I declined. She followed up with a passive-aggressive message. You're blowing this out of proportion. Families don't sue each other. No, but apparently they do try to frame each other when it fits their story. On the morning of the hearing, I rolled in early. Not because I was anxious. I just wanted a good seat for the circus. Rachel was already there, sitting stiffly beside a junior associate I'd never seen before. Guess the firm didn't want their name tied to this garbage. Guess she found someone green enough or broke enough to take her case. Either way, dude looked like he practiced law between DoorDash shifts. Anyways, she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Dark circles, flat expression, like reality had finally smacked her square in the face, and she was still deciding whether to cry or pretend it didn't hurt. Her lawyer opened the hearing with a dramatic retelling of Rachel's so-called reputation assassination, claimed I had expert access to her devices, that I deliberately manipulated private messages to frame her, that I had a personal vendetta born from childhood jealousy. I almost choked. Dude was reading from a script like this was Suits. Then Ellis stood up. No manipulation occurred, he said flatly. What did happen is the plaintiff stored explicit, incriminating content in a shared cloud folder with no encryption, no password protections, and later attempted to shift the fallout onto the defendant, who declined to assist her for free. He has provided documentation showing she asked for help, refused payment, and later blamed him when the leak occurred anyway. Then he handed over our receipts, timestamps, metadata, emails, logs, even a full list of the IP addresses that accessed her Google Drive, none of which matched mine. But you know whose did match? Her affair partners. When Ellis pointed it out, Rachel went pale. Her lawyer tried to pivot, said I might have instructed someone else to leak it. Judge asked, "Do you have any evidence of that?" "No, Your Honor, but the timing is circumstantial. Move on." I almost high-fived Ellis in the courtroom. When it was Rachel's turn to speak, she gave some half-shaky monologue about betrayal and my own brother turning on me. It wasn't even convincing. It was like watching a student who didn't study try to wing a presentation based on the Wikipedia summary. The judge finally leaned forward and looked straight at her. "You didn't file a case. You filed a personal vendetta dressed up as a legal complaint. That's not justice. That's weaponizing the court system to clean up your own mess. And we don't play that game here. You should know this since you were a lawyer, boom. Case dismissed. With prejudice. Meaning she couldn't refile, couldn't try again, couldn't drag me through another round of nonsense. It was over. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood up, nodded at Ellis, and walked out like I had better things to do. Which I did. That night, I posted a photo on my business page. Just me, standing in front of my laptop, middle finger taped down to hold up a cup of coffee. Caption, unemployed gamer, lawsuit survivor. Schedule's full. Book ahead. It wasn't petty. Okay, maybe it was. But it was also a flex. A deserved one. The comments came in fast. "Tell us the story, King. Hire this man before he's too expensive." Even better, one of my old professors from a boot camp program dropped in. "Knew you had it in you. Let 'em talk. You're building while they're blaming." Next day, Rachel posted something cryptic on her socials. A black and white quote image. Sometimes the ones closest to you cut the deepest. No name, no context, just pure victim mode. It got 4 likes. Mom messaged me again. "You embarrassed her in public. Was it really worth it?" I replied, "She sued me." I just showed up with the truth. No response. Business kept growing. More referrals came in. Ellis even looped me into a dev contract with another firm he represents. Small but solid clients. Good people. They saw me as a builder, not a failure. Meanwhile, Rachel went quiet. I heard through the grapevine she'd moved out of her condo, sold off her designer handbags online, and was taking time for her mental health. Which, look, take all the time you need. But don't act like you're healing when you were swinging a knife last week. That chapter was done, but the story wasn't over. Because success is loud, even when you whisper it. I didn't need to rub anything in. I didn't go around posting side-by-sides of court documents and the meme that started it all. I didn't dunk on her LinkedIn or tag her in inspirational comeback quotes. I just worked. Quietly. Efficiently. And the louder they got with damage control and excuses, the more attention landed on me anyway. 2 weeks after the court win, I signed 3 new clients. One was a referral from Ellis. The second came from a guy who saw my sarcastic post and said, "Anyone who survives a lawsuit and still delivers clean code is worth hiring." The third was completely random. Some real estate agency on the other side of the state. Apparently, their internal tech guy left after a crash, and they needed someone to clean it up fast. I had it running in 48 hours. They gave me a testimonial that literally said, "Professional, no drama, no excuses. Would hire again immediately." That review alone got me 4 more inquiries. I hired a part-time guy to help me handle the overflow. He was still in school, rough around the edges, but hungry. Reminded me of me, minus the chip on his shoulder. I liked that. And then it happened. A knock at my door. Again. I already knew before opening it. I stood there for a second, just staring at the door like, do I really want to hear this today? But curiosity won. I cracked it open. Mom and Dad. Round 2. But this time, they looked different. Not angry, not desperate, just sheepish. Dad's usual confidence had deflated into that stiff, hands-in-pockets posture he used when he forgot to pay the water bill when I was 13. Mom had sunglasses on. Indoors. Classic. "Can we come in?" she asked, voice low. "Didn't work out with Rachel, huh?" I said. No answer. I stepped aside. They didn't sit down right away, just hovered like they were waiting for me to offer snacks or small talk. I didn't. Dad finally cleared his throat. We just wanted to talk. I leaned against the counter. Talking's free, just making that clear up front. Mom sighed. We're struggling a bit. I said nothing, just raised my eyebrows. We've been helping Rachel out, she added, like I didn't already guess. She's been through a lot, Dad said, still in excuse mode. And after everything that happened with the firm, she's not exactly bouncing back. She was living with us for a while, Mom added, but she needed her own space again. So we helped her get an apartment. I tilted my head. Your golden child needed your help getting a place to live? Thought she was rebuilding her empire. She's trying, Mom said, but she can't get work. No one will hire her right now. I stayed quiet. Let it breathe. That always made them uncomfortable. Then came the punch. We were hoping, Dad said carefully, that maybe you could help. Just a little. She's not asking directly, obviously, but you know how hard things have been. Let me stop you right there, I said. You want me to give her money? They hesitated. Then Mom tried again. Just a small loan. We know you're doing well now. You have your own business. It wouldn't be much. And you think that makes this okay? I asked. You laughed when she called me unemployed. You backed her up when she tried to drag me through court. You accused me of sabotaging her. And now, because I didn't crash like she did, I owe her? It's not about owing, Dad said quickly. It's about family. I chuckled. Right. Now I'm family again. Not when you needed a signature to save her bar license. Not when I was building my business from nothing. But now that you need cash, now I'm back in the club. Mom's voice rose. Josh, don't do this. We've had our differences, yes. But Rachel's still your sister. And we're still your parents. Yeah, you are, I said. And I remember exactly how you acted when she was on top. I remember how many times I got ignored, dismissed, laughed at. You never believed in what I was doing. You thought coding was a phase. You thought freelancing meant lazy. You never saw me as anything but the backup plan. You're twisting this into something it's not, Dad said. We didn't mean any harm. You just didn't think I'd make it, I replied. The silence after that was loud. I walked over to the small table near the entryway and picked up a manila envelope. Inside, a copy of Rachel's lawsuit, the court's dismissal ruling, and my own recent business registration forms for tax season. I handed it to them. What's this? Mom asked. Proof, I said, of where I've been, of what I built, since you didn't seem to notice before. She opened it, glanced inside, then set it down without saying a word. I'm not giving her a cent, I continued, and I'm not giving you one either. You made your choices. You backed the wrong horse. Don't act surprised now that she can't carry you. That's unfair, Dad snapped. No, it's math, I said. You invested everything in her. Emotionally, financially, publicly. And when I succeeded, you weren't proud. You were quiet. So keep that same energy now. They didn't argue after that. Just stood there awkwardly, like they thought maybe I'd change my mind if they looked pitiful enough. Eventually, they left. Didn't even close the door properly. I had to walk over and shut it myself. By spring, everything she once bragged about was gone. The bar suspension went permanent. Quietly. No press release, no appeal, just a stripped title and a note on the official site saying, license inactive, ethics violation. No firm would touch her after that. Even the one where she did her internship wiped her from their alumni list. The whisper networks didn't forget either. Legal groups, clients, recruiters, everyone talked. Not loud, not public, but loud enough to shut every door before she could knock. She tried pivoting, consulting, strategy coaching. Nothing stuck. People Googled. They saw the screenshots, the court case, her attempt to blame her own brother. That kind of stain doesn't wash off. She moved again. Smaller place. Less central. No more coffee balcony photos. No more thriving captions. Just silence. Her friends stopped tagging her. The mutuals unfollowed. The ones who'd once said, your sister's killing it, now said nothing at all. And that silence? That was the loudest part. As for the lawsuit she filed against me, it didn't just get thrown out, it followed her. Every firm she applied to saw the record. Frivolous, personal, desperate. It told them everything they needed to know. She never reached out again. Neither did my parents. I didn't need an apology. I just needed space. And when people ask what happened between us, I keep it simple. She bet everything on being better than me. I just kept building. Story 3. Not a single member of my family showed up to my wedding. Not my parents, not even my best friend. They all chose my sister's engagement party instead. As we cut the cake, my phone lit up with a message from my mom. We need to talk, now. Followed by 43 missed calls. Title pretty much says it all, but buckle up because this story has everything. Family betrayal, gold digging gone catastrophically wrong, and revenge so perfectly executed it should be taught in business schools. This is a long one, but I promise every single word is worth reading. Grab some popcorn. Quick background about me since context absolutely matters for understanding what comes next. I'm Alex, 32 now, but this nuclear explosion happened when I was 29. I'm a construction project manager who clawed my way up from absolutely nothing through pure determination and backbreaking work. Grew up in a solidly middle-class household where my parents constantly preached about working hard and earning everything you get through honest effort. Went to trade school instead of college. Started as a basic laborer making minimum wage. Worked my way through every single position imaginable. Electrical work, plumbing, general contracting, site supervision, quality control. My sister Jessica is 2 years younger and has literally never worked a legitimate day in her entire privileged life. She figured out early that being conventionally attractive and knowing exactly how to manipulate people emotionally gets you much further than actual effort, talent, or developing any real skills. Been bouncing between wealthy boyfriends since high school, always hunting relentlessly for the next financial upgrade and bigger bank account. My parents absolutely loved this pattern because she consistently brought home guys with impressive salaries and prestigious job titles that made them look good socially. I've been with my wife Sarah since we met in a community college evening class 7 years ago. She's a registered nurse who genuinely cares about helping people and works incredibly hard for everything she has earned. We both sacrificed and struggled for years to build what we have today through careful planning and discipline. No handouts, no trust funds, no wealthy relatives writing checks. Just pure determination, honest work, and smart financial decisions. This is the detailed story of how my entire family chose my sister's superficial nonsense over my wedding day, and exactly how I made them regret that decision in ways they never imagined possible. 2 years ago, I was deep in planning my wedding to Sarah. We'd been engaged for 8 months and managed to save up $18,000 for a really nice ceremony through careful budgeting and working extra hours. Nothing extravagant or over the top, but we wanted our special day to be memorable and meaningful for everyone involved. We sent detailed save-the-dates back in January for our September 15th wedding date. Jessica had been dating this investment banker named Tyler for roughly 6 months at this point. This guy represented everything my parents had ever fantasized about their daughter bringing home. MBA from some prestigious university, drives an expensive BMW that cost more than most people's annual salary, works at a major financial firm downtown, pulling in well over $200,000 annually, plus substantial bonuses. Jessica was already posting these incredibly cringeworthy Instagram photos of them at fancy restaurants with captions like, "When he treats you like the queen you deserve to be," accompanied by crown and diamond emojis and hashtags about living her best life. Here's what you absolutely need to understand about Jessica's position in our family dynamics. She's always been the undisputed golden child, but not in any subtle or understated way. Complete princess treatment from the moment she was born, until now. When I graduated from trade school with honors and landed my first real project management position, my parents said, "That's nice, honey," and immediately changed the subject to something else. When Jessica graduated with her communications degree after changing majors 3 times, they threw an elaborate graduation party and spent months bragging to everyone they knew about their incredibly accomplished daughter. She's also completely lacking in genuine intelligence, but somehow convinced herself she's a master manipulator playing everyone around her like puppets. The type of person who genuinely believes she's playing sophisticated mental chess when she's really just moving checkers around the board without any coherent strategy whatsoever. In July, exactly 2 months before my carefully planned wedding, Jessica announces with great fanfare that Tyler proposed to her during some elaborate rooftop dinner that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Absolutely shocking development, right? But here's where this situation becomes completely insane and my blood pressure starts rising. She immediately starts planning this massive, over-the-top engagement party and deliberately picks September 15th for the date, the exact same day as my wedding that had been planned, announced, and saved for over 8 months. When I confronted her directly about this obvious and deliberate conflict, she just casually shrugged her shoulders and said, "Oh, I didn't even realize there was a problem with that date." But Tyler's parents are flying in from the West Coast, and it's literally the only weekend that works for everyone who actually matters in our lives. Everyone who actually matters. Just let that phrase sink in completely, and think about what she was really saying. My mom immediately started with her typical, "Can't you guys somehow work this out between yourselves" routine. Like I should seriously consider rescheduling my wedding, that we'd been meticulously planning and saving, for just because Princess Jessica suddenly needed that specific date for her engagement party. It's just an engagement party, I explained to them as patiently as possible. Those can happen literally any time throughout the year. Weddings are supposed to be once-in-a-lifetime events that families plan around. Jessica actually rolled her eyes at me like I was being completely unreasonable and dramatic. "Alex, you're being way too emotional about this. It's not just some random party we're throwing together. Tyler's father is a senior partner at his firm, and all their most important clients will be attending this event. This could be absolutely huge for Tyler's career advancement and our future together. Your wedding is just family members and some friends from school. Just family members and friends from school." My wedding was dismissed as just that in her selfish mind. The absolutely worst part of this entire situation? My parents immediately started nodding along enthusiastically, like she was making perfect logical sense instead of being completely selfish. 6 weeks before my wedding date, I started receiving these strange, evasive responses from various family members instead of the enthusiastic confirmations I'd expected. Instead of simply confirming their attendance like normal people do for family weddings, everyone kept saying vague things like, "We'll see how everything develops," or "We're still trying to figure out our schedule situation," which made absolutely no sense. My best man Jake, who I've known since we were in middle school together and considered my closest friend, calls me up one evening and says he needs to discuss something really important with me. His tone was weird and uncomfortable. Turns out Jessica had been continuously texting him behind my back for weeks, trying to convince him that I was being completely unreasonable and selfish about the date conflict situation, and that as my closest friend, he should help persuade me to be more flexible and understanding about the whole thing. She literally attempted to turn my own best man against me during my wedding planning process. The absolute breaking point came when my dad called me directly one evening and said, "Look, son, your sister's engagement party is genuinely important for her future prospects and financial security. Maybe you and Sarah could consider moving your wedding back a few months. You're both already established and stable in your careers." I completely lost my composure and started raising my voice. "Dad, are you actually seriously asking me to postpone my wedding so Jessica can have her engagement party on the same day? It's not just some random party, Alex. This is fundamentally about Jessica's future financial security and social standing. Tyler comes from an excellent family with business connections that could set them up for life financially. What about my life, Dad? What about my future and what matters to me and Sarah?" There was this really long, uncomfortable pause where I could hear him thinking, "You're already doing well for yourself, son. You have your career established. You're financially stable and independent. Jessica needs this opportunity much more than you need some big wedding ceremony." That was the exact moment I realized I was completely and utterly screwed in this family dynamic. In their twisted minds, my sister's shameless social climbing was infinitely more valuable and important than my marriage to the woman I loved. 3 weeks before my wedding date, all the RSVP responses came back in the mail. My parents, Jessica, both sets of grandparents, my uncles and aunts, basically every single member of my extended family, had formally declined my wedding invitation with polite excuses. They were all planning to attend Jessica's engagement party instead of my wedding. Even Jake, my supposed best man and closest friend since childhood, called me just 2 days before the wedding to completely bail on me at the last minute. "I'm really sorry, man, but Jessica makes some valid points about this situation. This could be genuinely important for their future together financially, and your wedding will still be meaningful and special with Sarah's family there to support you." I wanted to reach through the phone and physically shake him until his teeth rattled loose. My wedding day ended up being simultaneously the absolute best and worst day of my entire life up to that point. Sarah looked completely stunning and radiant in her dress. Her family was incredibly welcoming and supportive throughout the entire process, and our real friends who actually showed up made it feel genuinely special and memorable despite everything. But there was this massive, gaping, empty section where my supposedly loving family should have been sitting and celebrating with us during this important milestone. Sarah's father even graciously offered to walk me down the aisle, since my own father had chosen an engagement party over his son's wedding day. When he whispered, "I'm truly honored to call you my son," right before we reached the altar, I almost completely broke down emotionally in front of everyone. During the reception celebration afterward, I kept obsessively checking my phone like some kind of emotional masochist who couldn't stop picking at a wound. Jessica had been posting continuous Instagram stories throughout the entire evening from her party. Elaborate ice sculptures, gourmet catering setups, live musical entertainment, professional photography, the absolute works. She even posted a video of Tyler giving this heartfelt speech about how incredibly blessed and grateful he was to be joining such a wonderful, loving family. My family. The exact same family that couldn't be bothered to attend their son's wedding because they had something better to do. 3 months after my wedding, my grandfather on my mother's side unexpectedly passed away in his sleep. He was 89 years old and had been steadily declining for several months, so the death itself wasn't particularly surprising to anyone. What absolutely shocked everyone and caused major family drama was what happened at the official will reading ceremony. It turned out my grandfather had been paying much closer attention to our family dynamics than anyone had ever realized or given him credit for. He left me his entire house, a gorgeous 4-bedroom craftsman-style home in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in town, professionally appraised at $485,000. He also left me his completely restored vintage car collection consisting of 3 classic Mustangs he'd personally worked on for decades in his garage, plus an $85,000 life insurance policy that I had no idea existed. To Jessica, he left his personal book collection and a $2,500 government savings bond that had been sitting untouched for years. The family attorney read this information out loud with our entire family present in the room, and I watched Jessica's facial expression transform from smug confidence to complete shock to absolute rage in a matter of seconds. Her mouth literally fell open. "That's completely impossible," she declared loudly. "Grandpa always specifically told me I was his favorite granddaughter and that he was saving something special for me." The attorney simply looked down at his official papers without emotion. Mr. Patterson was extremely clear and specific about his final wishes. He actually revised this entire will quite recently before his passing. Later, I discovered through my cousin Amy that my grandfather had updated everything exactly 2 weeks after my wedding took place. The wise old man had been carefully keeping score of who showed up when it truly mattered most to the people they claimed to love. My parents were absolutely livid about this development and kept muttering about unfairness, but there wasn't a single thing they could legally do about it, since everything was properly documented. So suddenly, there I was at 30 years old, married to an absolutely amazing woman who supported my dreams, living in a $485,000 house I owned completely free and clear, with 3 valuable classic cars and substantial cash in the bank. But instead of just passively sitting on this unexpected inheritance, like some people might do, I made the strategic decision to use it as a solid foundation for building something much bigger and more substantial for our future. My first major move was selling one of the Mustangs for $38,000 to a collector who'd been admiring it for years, and using that money plus the life insurance payout to make down payments on 2 well-positioned rental properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. The real estate market in our area was just starting to heat up significantly, and I managed to get in at exactly the right time before prices exploded. At my regular job, I was already performing well as a project manager and had earned respect from my colleagues. But now I had the confidence and financial cushion necessary to take much bigger professional risks. I started my own construction consulting business during weekends and evenings, specializing in project management services for large-scale commercial renovations and new construction projects. Having a completely paid-off house meant I could take on projects with longer payment schedules and significantly undercut the pricing of more established firms while still maintaining healthy profit margins. Within exactly 18 months of starting my side business, it was generating more income than my regular day job at the construction company. I quit the company on good terms and transitioned to working full-time with my own operation. By the end of year 2, I was clearing approximately $195,000 annually and owned 4 different rental properties that were generating steady passive income every single month without requiring much hands-on management. Sarah and I were genuinely living our absolute dream life together. We traveled extensively to places we'd only read about before, hosted elaborate dinner parties at our beautiful house for friends and colleagues, and started having serious conversations about starting a family in the near future. Meanwhile, my biological family had essentially written me off completely as the ungrateful son who had simply gotten lucky with an inheritance he didn't deserve and probably wouldn't manage properly. What they had absolutely no idea about was that I was meticulously documenting and recording everything that happened involving our family dynamics. Every snide comment made about me behind my back, every family gathering I wasn't invited to participate in, every social media post where Jessica bragged extensively about her luxurious lifestyle while taking subtle but pointed shots at my character and life choices. Because Jessica's engagement to Tyler was starting to show some very serious structural cracks that were getting harder and harder to hide from public view. You see, Tyler had initially assumed he was getting a low-maintenance trophy wife who would be grateful for his financial support and wouldn't make excessive demands. But Jessica is high maintenance to an absolutely extreme degree that borders on delusional. She immediately quit her part-time administrative job, not that she had ever really been working seriously anyway, and expected him to completely fund her entire lifestyle without question or complaint. We're talking about $600 dinners multiple times every single week, shopping sprees that cost more than most people's monthly rent payments, an $85,000 luxury Mercedes SUV for her birthday present that she insisted was practical. Tyler was certainly making decent money in his investment banking position, but Jessica was systematically burning through it much faster than he could possibly earn it, even with his substantial bonuses. And unlike the trust fund babies she had typically dated in the past, Tyler actually had to work extremely hard for every single dollar he earned and understood the value of money. My cousin Amy, who was literally the only family member who still maintained regular contact with me after the wedding fiasco, would periodically give me detailed updates on how Jessica was systematically draining Tyler's savings account and how my parents were getting increasingly worried that their golden goose might be getting tired of being constantly plucked clean. Chapter 5. Cracks in the Perfect Foundation. By the time I turned 31, my business was absolutely crushing every performance metric imaginable and exceeding my wildest expectations. I'd successfully expanded operations into 3 different regional markets, employed 12 full-time people who I treated well and paid competitive salaries, and was solidly on track to clear $320,000 that year before taxes. Sarah and I purchased a beautiful lake house with cash as our weekend retreat, and were having increasingly serious discussions about starting our family within the next year. Meanwhile, Jessica's supposedly perfect fairy tale life was systematically falling apart, and she was far too clueless and self-absorbed to see the disaster approaching like a freight train. Tyler had started working significantly longer hours and traveling much more frequently for business purposes, which Jessica interpreted as him being incredibly dedicated to securing their financial future together. In actual reality, Amy informed me during our monthly coffee meetings, he was desperately avoiding going home because Jessica had become completely insufferable to live with on a daily basis and would constantly badger him about money. She'd transformed into one of those absolute nightmare fiancés who genuinely believe that wedding planning means spending unlimited amounts of someone else's money without any constraints, limitations, or consideration for financial reality whatsoever. The venue she had decided she absolutely needed for their perfect day cost $55,000 just for the basic space rental fee, not including catering decorations or any other services. Her dream wedding dress carried a $9,500 price tag from some designer boutique. She wanted an elaborate 3-week honeymoon in Europe that would cost approximately $28,000, including first-class flights, luxury hotels, and fine dining experiences. Tyler's parents, who had initially been completely charmed by Jessica's carefully crafted performance during their first meetings, were starting to see through the superficial act she'd been maintaining. At family dinner gatherings, she'd make passive-aggressive comments about how certain people didn't properly understand the importance of investing in relationships and maintaining appropriate social appearances and standing in the community. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner at my parents' house, which I wasn't invited to attend, naturally, since I was now persona non grata. Amy secretly recorded portions of the conversation on her phone and sent me the footage later that evening, knowing I'd want to see what I was missing. Jessica was prominently showing off her engagement ring, 4.5 carats, $45,000 according to her constant bragging on social media, and enthusiastically discussing elaborate wedding plans in excruciating detail when Tyler's mother asked what seemed like an innocent question. What kind of work does Jessica do professionally these days? Complete and total silence filled the dining room. You could hear a pin drop. Then Jessica laughed dismissively and said, "Oh, I'm currently between career opportunities right now while I focus on our relationship. Tyler and I mutually decided it would be much better for me to focus entirely on planning our life together rather than getting distracted by some meaningless job." Tyler's facial expression in that video was absolutely priceless and worth watching multiple times. You could literally see the exact moment he realized his fiancée had just openly admitted to being a professional gold digger directly in front of his parents and extended family. That was precisely when I knew it was the perfect time to execute the plan I'd been carefully developing over the past several months. Jessica's wedding was officially scheduled for June 12th, exactly 2 years after my own modest celebration. Unlike my carefully budgeted ceremony that focused on meaning over materialism, this was going to be a $130,000 spectacular extravaganza, funded entirely by Tyler and his increasingly concerned family members who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Through my expanding business network and professional associations, I'd connected with a forensic accountant who specialized in conducting financial investigations for family law cases and divorce proceedings. We developed a genuine friendship through a professional association, and during one of our regular conversations over coffee, I casually mentioned my sister's increasingly problematic financial situation. Your sister sounds like a real piece of work, he observed thoughtfully, after I described her spending patterns. Exactly the type of woman who would systematically drain someone's accounts and disappear if she thought she could get away with it without consequences. That particular conversation sparked an idea that would ultimately change everything for everyone involved in this family drama. I began systematically documenting Jessica's spending patterns, using her own proudly posted social media content as evidence. Every expensive dinner she bragged about attending, every elaborate shopping trip she documented with photos, every luxury vacation she photographed and posted online with detailed captions. I created an incredibly detailed spreadsheet tracking her lifestyle costs based entirely on her own evidence and constant bragging about her lavish lifestyle. The numbers were absolutely staggering when compiled together and analyzed objectively. In the 20 months since her engagement began, Jessica had been consistently living a lifestyle that cost approximately $9,200 per month, every single penny funded by Tyler's income and savings, with no contribution from her whatsoever. But here's what made my plan absolutely perfect and virtually foolproof. I'd also been carefully tracking Tyler's career progression through various industry connections and professional contacts in the financial sector. His firm had been struggling significantly with major market changes and regulatory pressures, and there were increasingly serious rumors about substantial layoffs coming soon to cut costs. The big promotion Jessica kept bragging about constantly to justify her excessive spending? It was never going to happen according to my sources. 2 months before the wedding date, I started making carefully calculated strategic moves that would set everything in motion. First, I contacted Tyler's father through legitimate business channels and professional networking. I introduced myself as a fellow professional and mentioned I was genuinely concerned about some troubling industry rumors regarding Tyler's firm's overall financial stability and future prospects in the current market. "Oh, you've heard about the serious troubles at Meridian Capital too?" He responded immediately with obvious concern. "We're getting increasingly worried ourselves about Tyler's situation. He's been extremely secretive about work situations lately, and some things Jessica's been saying definitely don't match what we're hearing from other reliable industry contacts." I planted just enough legitimate concern to get him asking all the right questions without seeming suspicious. Second, I reached out to a guy I knew who worked directly at Tyler's company in a different department. Without ever mentioning my personal connection to Jessica, I asked general questions about the firm's stability since I was supposedly considering some potential business partnerships with them. "Honestly, I'd strongly recommend staying far away from any deals with them," he warned me seriously. "We've had 3 major layoff rounds in the past year alone. The partners are hemorrhaging money rapidly, and Tyler's been on extremely thin ice for months. Word around the office is he'll probably be gone by summer." Everything was falling into place absolutely perfectly, according to my plan. 3 weeks before Jessica's elaborate wedding that she'd been planning obsessively for months, the perfect storm finally hit with devastating force that would change everything. Tyler got laid off completely from his investment banking position. Not just fired for performance issues, his entire division was eliminated as part of massive company restructuring and downsizing to cut costs. His $210,000 annual salary vanished overnight, along with his substantial bonus structure and valuable stock options that Jessica had been counting on. But Jessica had absolutely no idea this catastrophic event had happened, because Tyler was too embarrassed and terrified to tell her the truth about their financial situation. He'd been desperately putting wedding expenses on multiple credit cards for months, frantically hoping to land another comparable position before anyone discovered his real financial situation and the house of cards collapsed. This was my perfect moment to strike decisively and execute the plan I'd been developing. I created a completely anonymous email account and sent Tyler's father a comprehensive analysis of Jessica's documented spending over the past 2 years. I included detailed screenshots of her social media posts, constantly bragging about expensive purchases, luxury restaurant visits, designer shopping sprees, and elaborate vacation trips. The report clearly demonstrated that Jessica had been systematically burning through approximately $165,000 annually of Tyler's money on pure lifestyle expenses and status symbols with no regard for their actual financial situation. I included a carefully worded note saying I was a concerned business associate who thought the family should be fully aware of the financial situation before making any major commitments or investments. Tyler's father immediately forwarded this detailed information to Tyler with an urgent message saying they needed to have an emergency family meeting about Jessica's spending patterns and their growing concerns about the upcoming marriage and financial obligations. Meanwhile, Amy informed me that Tyler's mother had been conducting her own investigation and discovered that Jessica had been actively telling people Tyler was being promoted to partner, completely false, and that they were seriously looking at houses in the $900,000 range, absolutely impossible, given their actual financial situation. The final confrontation happened at what was supposed to be their last wedding planning meeting with vendors. Tyler showed up with both parents and presented Jessica with printed bank statements, clearly showing he'd accumulated $52,000 in credit card debt funding her lifestyle demands. His father presented the comprehensive spending analysis I'd provided them. "Jessica," Tyler said, his voice shaking with emotion and stress, "we need to postpone the wedding indefinitely until we can figure out our financial situation and get back on stable ground." According to Amy, who heard every single detail from my mother afterward, Jessica completely and utterly lost her mind in spectacular fashion. She started screaming about how they absolutely couldn't postpone because everything was already arranged and paid for, with money Tyler didn't actually have. She accused Tyler's parents of being jealous of her success and happiness and said they were deliberately trying to sabotage the wedding because they never thought she was good enough for their precious son. Then Tyler dropped the nuclear bomb that destroyed everything. "Jessica, I lost my job a month ago. We can't afford this wedding. We can't afford your lifestyle. We can't afford anything you've been planning." Jessica's response was pure gold and showed her true character. "Well then, get another job immediately. This is my special day, and I'm absolutely not canceling it because you can't handle your career responsibilities." Tyler walked out immediately. His parents walked out behind him. The wedding planner gathered her materials and left without another word. Just like that, the $130,000 wedding that was supposed to happen in 3 weeks was completely destroyed and over. The aftermath was absolutely beautiful to watch unfold from my safe distance as an outside observer. Jessica had to move back in with my parents because Tyler immediately kicked her out of his apartment and changed the locks. The wedding venue kept the entire $18,000 deposit according to their contract terms. The caterer kept another $9,500 for food that would never be served. Jessica was stuck with a $9,500 wedding dress she'd never wear and approximately $35,000 worth of other deposits and payments that were completely non-refundable according to the contract she'd signed. But the story gets so much better from there, and I was just getting started with my revenge. Within 1 week of the wedding cancellation, Tyler's parents sent Jessica an official legal demand letter for $78,000, representing everything they had invested in the wedding that was now completely lost due to her unreasonable financial expectations and irresponsible behavior. They had receipts for everything. Jessica had exactly $0 to pay this substantial debt because she'd never actually held a legitimate job in her entire adult life and had no savings whatsoever. She tried desperately to get Tyler back with tearful phone calls and apologies, but he'd already started dating a coworker who was a certified financial planner with her own apartment and a fully funded retirement account. My parents, who had enabled Jessica's entitled behavior for years without consequences, suddenly found themselves supporting a 29-year-old daughter with no job, no savings, no boyfriend, and lifestyle expectations they couldn't possibly afford to maintain on their retirement income. That's when the increasingly desperate phone calls to me started coming in regularly, multiple times per day. First, my mom with her guilt-tripping voice. "Alex, I know things have been strained between us lately, but Jessica is really struggling right now and needs family support. Maybe you could help her find a position with one of your business contacts? You know so many successful people now." Straight to voicemail without hesitation. I didn't even listen to the full message. Then my dad, with his authoritative tone, "Son, I know we haven't always agreed on everything, but family is family and we stick together. Jessica made some errors in judgment, but she's learned from this experience. Maybe you could loan her some money to get stabilized and back on her feet?" Voicemail again. I was enjoying the silence. Finally, Jessica herself, calling while crying hysterically. "Alex, I know I made terrible mistakes and hurt you badly. I know I wasn't supportive during your wedding situation, and I'm truly sorry for everything. But I'm your sister, and I desperately need help. Tyler's parents are threatening legal action, and I don't know what to do. Can you please help me get through this difficult time? This particular call I actually decided to answer because I wanted to hear her beg. Hey, Jessica. Oh, thank goodness, Alex. I've been so worried you wouldn't speak to me anymore. Look, I know the wedding date thing got complicated and feelings were hurt, but that's all in the past now. I really need. Stop talking immediately. What? I don't understand. I said stop. Here's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get a job. A real job where you actually work for money and earn a paycheck. You're going to pay back Tyler's parents every single dollar you owe them. And you're going to accomplish all of this without any assistance from me whatsoever. But Alex, I don't understand why you're being so harsh. We're family. Grandpa left you all that money. You have your successful business. You could easily. Let me stop you right there. Grandpa left me that inheritance because I showed up for his funeral while you were shopping. You know where you were that day? Using Tyler's credit card at the mall. He left me that money because he recognized I'd actually built something meaningful with my life through hard work. That's not fair. I didn't know Grandpa was keeping track of who. Of course you didn't know. You never pay attention to anything that doesn't directly benefit you personally. Just like you didn't pay attention when you deliberately scheduled your engagement party on my wedding day after I'd announced the date months earlier. Long, uncomfortable silence where I could hear her breathing. Look, she said, switching to that manipulative tone she'd perfected since childhood. I know I made some mistakes in the past, but I'm your baby sister. Don't you want me to be happy and successful? You mean don't I want you to be comfortable without earning it? No, Jessica. I genuinely don't want that for you anymore. Please, Alex. I'm literally begging you and swallowing my pride. I'll do anything you ask of me. Here's what you can do. Get a job at a retail store or restaurant or anywhere that will hire someone with no real work experience and no useful skills. Move into a small apartment that you pay for with your own earnings. And maybe in a few years, after you've proven you can function as a responsible adult, we can discuss having a relationship again. But what am I supposed to tell people? All my friends are going to know about Tyler's parents suing me. This is completely humiliating and embarrassing. Welcome to consequences, Jessica. I hear they're quite educational when you finally experience them. I hung up and felt better than I had in years. That conversation happened 10 months ago. Here's where everyone ended up in this story. Jessica eventually found work at a department store in the mall, making $13 per hour folding clothes. She moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment with a roommate and drives a 2010 Honda Civic she bought from a used car lot. Her Instagram went from luxury lifestyle bragging to generic inspirational quotes that nobody believes or engages with. She's been on exactly 4 dates in 10 months, all with guys who definitely cannot and will not fund the lifestyle she used to demand. Most of her old friends stopped associating with her once the money dried up, and she couldn't afford to go out anymore. Tyler landed a position at a smaller firm making about $140,000 and got engaged to the financial planner. They're planning a modest wedding that they're paying for entirely themselves without any family drama. My parents have started reaching out to me again, but only because they need advice about their retirement planning, and they've realized I actually know something about managing money successfully. Funny how that works when they need something. Jake, my former best man, sent me a long, apologetic text last month saying he didn't understand the full situation and asking if we could meet up to talk things through. I never responded and deleted his number. Sarah and I just purchased a second vacation property in Costa Rica and are planning to start trying for our first child next year. My business is projected to clear $425,000 this year, and I'm considering expanding into 2 additional markets. I never gave Jessica a single penny throughout her entire ordeal. Not when Tyler's parents sued her and she had to settle for $40,000 paid over 5 years. Not when she got evicted from her first apartment for missing rent payments. Not when she crashed her car and needed money for repairs and insurance. Every time my parents suggest I should help family during difficult times, I remind them that family is supposed to show up for weddings and important life events. The absolute best part happened last month when Sarah and I attended our friend Mike's wedding at a beautiful venue downtown. Guess who was working as part of the catering staff serving guests? Jessica didn't notice me, but I saw her clearly throughout the evening. Hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail, wearing a black uniform polo shirt and slacks, carrying trays of appetizers to guests celebrating someone else's perfect day while getting paid minimum wage plus tips. Life has an incredible sense of justice and irony sometimes. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't destroying someone's life yourself. Sometimes it's just stepping back and letting them destroy their own life while you build something incredible and watch from a distance. Story 4. I got a call from my neighbor about a moving truck at my house while I was at work. I came home to find my parents and brother moving his family into my house without permission. You don't need that much space anyway, they said. So I called the police. This happened 8 months ago, and I'm finally ready to share the whole story. I'm 29 male, work in commercial construction management, and this is hands down the most insane family drama I've ever experienced. Sorry for the length, but this gets absolutely wild and the ending is worth it. Some background about my family dynamics. I'm the older of two sons. My brother David is 26 and has been the golden child his entire life despite being a complete disaster. Dropped out of college twice, can't hold a job for more than 6 months, got his girlfriend Crystal pregnant at 24, and they've been leeching off our parents ever since. Meanwhile, I worked construction through high school, got my project management certification, and worked my way up to making $125,000 annually managing commercial building projects. 3 years ago, I bought a house. Not just any house, a 2,600 square foot renovated Craftsman in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in our city. I put down $75,000 cash that I'd saved working 60-hour weeks and living like a monk for 4 years. The place needed work, but I spent 2 years doing renovations myself during weekends and evenings. The kitchen renovation alone took 6 months of weekends. I gutted everything down to the studs, installed custom cabinets I built myself, and topped it all with granite countertops. The basement transformation was my masterpiece. What had been a dingy, unfinished space became a proper entertainment area with a wet bar, custom seating, and a home theater system with surround sound speakers I wired myself. The master bathroom took 3 months of careful planning. I completely reconfigured the layout, added a walk-in shower with custom herringbone tile work, positioned a soaking tub to catch natural light, and installed heated floors with a double vanity. The original hardwood floors needed complete refinishing. I spent a full month of evenings stripping, sanding, staining, and sealing every square foot myself. I updated the electrical system to modern code and upgraded all the plumbing. The landscaping was a 2-year project. I removed overgrown shrubs, planted trees strategically for privacy, installed an irrigation system, and created garden beds with perennial plants. I built the back deck myself using composite materials. Every nail, every tile, every drop of sweat equity was mine. The house sits on a 1/4-acre lot with mature oak trees, a 2-car garage, and a workshop where I restore classic cars. Property values have increased 30% since I bought it. It's not just a house, it's my sanctuary, my investment, and proof of everything I've worked for. My parents, Richard and Linda, have always had opinions about everyone else's life choices. Mom thinks her sons exist to fulfill her vision of family. She posts inspirational quotes about family on Facebook while trying to control every aspect of her children's lives. Dad just goes along with whatever she says to avoid conflict. David and Crystal live in my parents' basement with their 2 kids. David works sporadically. Delivery driver, warehouse temp. Currently unemployed again after getting fired for showing up late. Crystal has never held a job, spending her days making TikTok videos about her struggle, while my parents provide free housing, utilities, food, and babysitting. The family dynamic has always been David gets endless chances while I'm expected to have my life together and help everyone else. When David crashed his car at 22, my parents bought him another one. When he got arrested for shoplifting, they paid for his lawyer. When Crystal got pregnant, they threw a baby shower and set up a nursery. When I graduated college, I got a handshake. About 6 months ago, my family started making weird comments about my house during our monthly family dinners. It's so big for just one person. You rattling around in all that space. Must be lonely in such a big place. David's family is really outgrowing the basement. I'd just laugh it off and change the subject because, honestly, what else was I supposed to say? That I enjoyed having space? That I'd earned it? Then the comments got more pointed and frequent. You should really think about downsizing. A nice apartment downtown would be so convenient for you. David needs to consider the children's future. Real estate is such a good investment. You could probably make money selling. The classic guilt trip routine that my mother has perfected over decades of manipulating her family. I should mention that while I make good money, I'm not careless with it. My mortgage payment is $2,950 per month, including taxes and insurance, which is totally manageable on my salary. I've got $45,000 in savings, I max out my retirement contributions, and I still have plenty left over for my hobbies: woodworking, mountain biking, and restoring classic cars. I drive a paid-off truck, I cook most of my meals at home, and I'm careful with my spending. I earned every dollar through hard work and smart decisions, not luck or handouts. The situation escalated about a month ago during what I thought was a normal family dinner. David was complaining about their living situation. how cramped they were in the basement, how the kids needed their own rooms, how Crystal was getting depressed being stuck downstairs all the time. My mom was making sympathetic noises and shooting meaningful looks at me across the table. Finally, she came out with it. You know, Alex, you have all that space going unused. Those guest bedrooms just sitting empty most of the time. They're not guest bedrooms, I corrected. One's my home office, the other's my workshop storage. But you could easily combine those functions into one room, she continued. Really, it's almost wasteful to have so much space for just one person. I could see where this was going. Mom, let's not do this. Do what? I'm just saying that family helps family. David's in a tough spot right now. David's been in a tough spot for 6 years. Maybe it's time he figured it out himself. That's when Crystal chimed in. It's easy for you to say. You don't have kids to worry about. Some of us have responsibilities. I looked at her. This woman who'd never held a job in her life, lecturing me about responsibility. Crystal, I have responsibilities too. Like the mortgage I pay every month on the house I bought. But you don't need all that space, David said. It's not like you're using it. How do you know what I use it for? Come on, man. You've got like 4 bedrooms and you sleep in one. That's 3 empty bedrooms while my kids are sharing a basement room with no windows. Then get your own place. The table went quiet. My dad cleared his throat. Son, maybe we could work something out. Some kind of arrangement that helps everyone. What kind of arrangement? My mom leaned forward, and I could see she'd been planning this conversation. Well, what if David's family moved into your place? Just temporarily. You could get a nice apartment downtown, close to work, no maintenance hassles, and David could take over the house payments. I actually laughed. Are you serious? David can't even hold a job for 6 months, and you want him to take over a $3,000 mortgage? He'd grow into it, my mom said. Having that responsibility might be exactly what he needs to get his life together. And what happens when he can't make the payments? Because we all know he can't make the payments. That's a pretty negative attitude, Crystal said. Maybe if people believed in David more, he'd do better. I've believed in David for 26 years. At some point, belief needs to be backed up by actions. The conversation devolved from there, with my family making increasingly ridiculous arguments about how this arrangement would benefit everyone, especially me. According to them, I'd save money, have less responsibility, be closer to work, and best of all, I'd be helping family. It was a win-win-win situation that only a selfish person would refuse. I left dinner early that night, but I thought that was the end of it. My family has always been big on dramatic conversations that fizzle out when reality sets in. I figured they'd realize how impossible their plan was and move on to something else. I was wrong. The following Tuesday, I was reviewing project blueprints in my home office when I got a text from my mom, coming by around 2 p.m. to measure the guest bedrooms. David wants to see if his furniture will fit. I called her immediately. Mom, what are you talking about? Why would David's furniture need to fit in my guest rooms? Oh, sweetie, we've been discussing this more since Sunday. David's lease is up next month, and his landlord is raising the rent to an impossible amount. We thought you could move into that nice apartment complex downtown, and David could take over the house payments. It really is the perfect solution. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. This is my house. I bought it. I renovated it. I pay for it. Well, yes, but you don't really need all that space. And David has children to think about. You're being selfish keeping all that room to yourself when your brother's family is cramped in a basement. Selfish. For wanting to live in the house I bought with my own money. Mom, we're not having this conversation. David can figure out his own housing situation like every other adult in America. She got that icy tone she uses when she's not getting her way. Alex, we've given this considerable thought and discussed it extensively. It's the right thing to do for the family. David can probably take over your mortgage payments. It'll actually save you money in the long run. Take over my payments? The guy who's been unemployed for 3 months and has never paid for anything more expensive than a cell phone bill? The answer is no. End of discussion. Don't be hasty. At least think about it overnight. We'll come by tomorrow to take some measurements and look at the logistics. No, you won't. Don't come by. Don't measure anything. The answer is no. It will always be no. And if you show up at my house without permission, I'll call the police. She hung up on me. That should have been the end of it. But my family has never been good at accepting no for an answer, especially when they've convinced themselves they're entitled to something. 2 weeks later, I was on a job site about 40 minutes from home, overseeing the installation of HVAC systems in a new office building, when I got a call from my elderly neighbor across the street. She's this sweet woman who's lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and keeps an eye on things for everyone. Alex, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you at work, but there's a moving truck at your house and people carrying furniture inside. I thought you might want to know since your car isn't in the driveway. My blood turned to ice. What kind of people? Well, it looks like your parents and that young man who visits sometimes. And there's a pregnant woman directing where they should put things. I assumed you knew about it, but then I realized you might not since you're not there. I was in my truck and driving home before she finished the sentence. I called my site supervisor and told him there was a family emergency, then drove like my life depended on it, weaving through traffic and running yellow lights. When I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A U-Haul truck was backed up to my front door. My parents' car was there. David's beat-up Honda was there. And there were people moving furniture, baby cribs, a ratty couch, boxes of clothes, even a refrigerator, into my house. I sat in my truck for 30 seconds, trying to process the absolute audacity. They were actually trying to move David's family into my house, without asking, without permission, without any legal right whatsoever. Like I didn't exist. Like my ownership meant nothing. Like they could just decide to redistribute my property because they felt like it. I got out and walked straight to my front door, which was propped open with a box. The scene inside was even worse than I'd imagined. David was carrying a mattress up my stairs, grunting with effort and sweating through his shirt. Crystal was sitting on my leather couch, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, while her 2 kids ran around getting their sticky hands on everything. My mom was standing in the middle of it all with a clipboard and measuring tape, directing the operation like some kind of demented moving coordinator. What the heck is going on here? I said loud enough that everyone stopped what they were doing. My mom turned around with this fake surprised expression, like she'd been caught organizing a surprise party instead of committing a felony. Alex, you're home early. We wanted to get David settled before you got back, so it wouldn't be such a disruption for you. Settled? Get out. All of you. Right now. David had stopped halfway up the stairs with the mattress, his face red from exertion. Dude, relax. Mom explained everything to us. This works out better for everyone. You get to downsize, we get the space we need, everyone wins. Did she explain how you're going to make a $2,950 mortgage payment on your $0 salary? Crystal looked up from her phone for the first time since I'd arrived. Actually, we talked to someone at the social services office about government assistance programs for housing. With David's income level and the kids, we can probably get help with the payments. Plus, there are tax benefits for families. I stared at her. This woman who had never contributed a dime to society, casually discussing how to put my house on government assistance. You want to put my house on welfare? It's not like that, my mom jumped in, setting down her clipboard. David would be taking over the financial responsibilities, and if he needs a little help from available programs, that's what they're for. It's actually very responsible planning. Programs are for people who buy houses they can afford, not for people who steal houses from their brothers. Nobody's stealing anything. My dad finally spoke up from where he was stacking boxes in my hallway. This is just a family arrangement. You'll save money living downtown. David gets space for his kids. Your mother and I get to see our grandchildren in a proper home. Everyone benefits. Everyone benefits except me, who loses the house I bought and renovated myself. Did any of you think to ask me before moving someone into my house? We knew you'd be difficult about it, my mom said matter-of-factly. That's why we wanted to present it as a done deal. Once you see how well it works out, you'll understand that we were right. How did you even get in? I never gave anyone permission to enter my house. David held up a key, dangling it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mom had a spare maid when she house sat for you last year. Remember when you went to Colorado for that wedding? Last year when I went to Colorado for my friend's bachelor party. She'd offered to check on the place and water my plants, and I gave her a key for the weekend. I never got it back, and when I asked about it, she said she'd lost it. She'd been lying for over a year. You've been planning this, I said, the pieces falling into place. This isn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. Who are you calling? My mom demanded, her voice rising an octave. The police. To report a break-in and theft in progress. Alex, put that phone down. We're family. You can't call the police on family. Family doesn't break into each other's houses and try to steal them. The 911 operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a break and enter in progress. People have moved furniture into my house without permission and are refusing to leave. The police arrived a few minutes later. 2 officers, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else when they realized it was a domestic situation. After reviewing my documentation and confirming I owned the house, they ordered my family to remove everything and leave. I changed my locks that same night and installed a security system. But this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to 38 text messages from various family members and family friends. Apparently, my mom had spent the entire night calling everyone she knew to tell them what a heartless son I was, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. But the absolute peak of their delusion came the following Saturday, when they staged an intervention in my driveway. My parents, David's entire family, plus my aunt and uncle, and my mom's pastor from her church. 8 adults standing in my driveway like they were about to perform some kind of exorcism. The sight was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. They'd clearly coordinated this ambush, probably spending hours planning their approach and dividing up talking points. My mom stood in the center like a general commanding troops, while my aunt held a folder of what looked like printed articles, probably about family obligation and housing assistance programs. The pastor wore his most serious expression, the one he probably reserved for addressing serious sins from the pulpit. "Alex," my mom said in her most serious voice, "we need to have a family meeting." "No, we don't. Get off my property before I call the police again." "Son," the pastor said, stepping forward with his hands clasped in front of him, like he was delivering a sermon. "I understand there's been some conflict in your family. Your mother asked me to speak with you about the importance of family unity and Christian charity." I looked at my mom in disbelief. "You brought your pastor to guilt-trip me into giving away my house?" The pastor continued in that earnest tone that religious people use when they think they're saving your soul. "The Bible teaches us to care for our family, especially children in need. Matthew tells us that whatever we do for the least of these, we do for Christ himself. The Bible also teaches that if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. David's 26 years old with 2 kids and he's unemployed by choice. Maybe start there, Pastor." My aunt stepped forward, trying to take a more emotional approach. She was holding what appeared to be printouts from websites about family financial planning and multi-generational housing arrangements. "Alex, sweetie, we've all helped family over the years. When you needed help in college, I worked 3 jobs in college and graduated debt-free. When you needed a place to stay after graduation, I lived in a 400-square-foot studio apartment and saved every penny for 2 years." My uncle tried a different angle, the man-to-man approach that older men always think will work on younger ones. "Look, son, I get it. You worked hard for what you have. Nobody's taking that away from you. But David's got kids to think about. Family responsibility. You'll understand when you have children someday. If I have kids someday, I'll plan for them and provide for them myself, like a responsible adult. I won't expect my brother to give up his house to make room for my poor decisions." Crystal was standing behind David holding their youngest, giving me a look like I'd personally ruined her life. The baby was fussing in the heat, and she was clearly uncomfortable being pregnant and standing in my driveway for this ridiculous confrontation. "This is exactly why you can't keep a girlfriend," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're selfish and cold. No woman wants a man who won't help his own family." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "Crystal, you're 24 years old with 2 kids, no job, no education, no skills, and you're living in your boyfriend's parents' basement. Maybe don't give relationship advice." "Hey!" David stepped forward, finally showing some backbone. "Don't talk to her like that. Then tell her to keep her mouth shut about things she doesn't understand." My mom tried to regain control of the intervention, clearly frustrated that their carefully planned ambush was falling apart. "Alex, we've talked to someone with legal expertise about this situation. There may be options for family property arrangements that you haven't considered." This was new information, and it sent a chill down my spine. "What kind of legal options?" A family law attorney from our church congregation explained that in some cases, family property can be subject to family necessity arrangements, especially when children are involved, and there are significant disparities in family wealth and living situations. I stared at them, realizing they actually thought they could sue their way into my house. They'd actually consulted someone about legal ways to force me to give up my property. Did this church attorney also explain that I'm 29 years old and you have 0 legal claim to my property? Did he mention that what you attempted was breaking and entering? Did he explain the difference between wishful thinking and actual law? When your father and I are old and need help, don't come crying to us for support, my mom said, playing her final card. "Deal," I said without hesitation. That stunned her. She expected me to back down, to choose potential future guilt over present-day boundaries. They all left, leaving me feeling both victorious and sad. But this wasn't over. My family doesn't give up easily, especially when they're desperate. And I was starting to suspect there was more to their desperation than just David needing more space. I decided to investigate, and what I found changed everything. Public records in our state are mostly available online if you know where to look and what to search for. I spent an entire Saturday afternoon diving deep into county records, court filings, and property databases. It took me about 6 hours of methodical searching to piece together the full picture. And when I did, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The first red flag was a second mortgage filing I found buried in the property records. My parents were in foreclosure proceedings. According to the county records, they'd taken out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago for $90,000. The paperwork showed they'd claimed it was for home improvements and debt consolidation, but I could see from the timing that it coincided with when David and Crystal had moved in. Then last year, they'd taken out a home equity line of credit for another $45,000, maxing out their borrowing capacity. They owed almost $220,000 on a house worth maybe $180,000 in the current market. They were completely underwater. But the real shock was the foreclosure notice dated 7 weeks ago. They were 4 months behind on payments, and the bank was moving to repossess. They had until the end of next month to bring the account current or lose the house. The total amount needed to cure the default was over $18,000, money they clearly didn't have. Now their desperation made perfect sense. They weren't just trying to help David. They were trying to save themselves. If David took over my mortgage payments, they could use the money they'd been spending supporting him and his family to catch up on their own house payments. It was a desperate attempt to rob Peter to pay Paul, with me as the unwilling victim. But where had all that money gone? $135,000 in loans over 2 years was serious cash for people on a fixed income. I kept digging through business registration records and found the smoking gun. 18 months ago, my dad had registered an LLC called Compilation-Family Investments. According to the filings, it was supposed to be a house flipping business. The paperwork showed grand plans for buying, renovating, and reselling properties for profit during what they saw as a red-hot real estate market. More research revealed the full extent of their financial disaster. Morrison Family Investments had purchased 2 properties using the borrowed money from their house. The first was a 1960s ranch house they bought for $98,000, intending to flip it for $150,000 after renovations. Instead, they got in over their heads with structural problems they hadn't anticipated, contractor issues, and permit delays. The house sat on the market for 8 months before finally selling for $63,000, a $35,000 loss plus carrying costs, taxes, and renovation expenses. The second property was even worse. They'd bought a foreclosed duplex for $110,000, planning to renovate and rent it out for steady income. But they'd underestimated the extent of the damage and the cost of bringing it up to rental code standards. When they couldn't complete the renovations or make the payments, that property went into foreclosure too. It was eventually sold at auction for $75,000, meaning they lost about $35,000 on that deal as well, not counting the money they'd poured into attempted repairs. My parents had blown their retirement savings and leveraged their house to the maximum, trying to become real estate moguls during the pandemic boom. They'd watched HGTV shows and thought it looked easy, completely ignoring the risks and complexities involved in property investment. And now they were about to lose everything. But the financial disaster went even deeper than I initially thought when I started digging into David and Crystal's situation. David had filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago. Chapter 7. Complete discharge of all debts including $28,000 in credit cards and a defaulted car loan. That explained why he couldn't qualify for his own mortgage. Crystal had multiple collection agencies after her for unpaid medical bills, store credit cards, and something called quick cash loans for $4,200 at an astronomical interest rate. My perfect judgmental family was completely broke. Not just broke, financially destroyed. And they'd been hiding it from me while lecturing me about family responsibility. Suddenly, their plan made perfect sense. Get me out of my house, move David's family in, use the money they'd save on supporting David to catch up on their mortgage payments. They probably figured once I was paying rent downtown instead of building equity, I'd be more willing to help them out financially on a regular basis. I called my lawyer and told him what I'd found. Alex, you need to be very careful here. Desperate people do desperate things, but you also have them completely documented if they try anything else. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect myself from my family's schemes. I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their choices and learned that actions have real results. Over the next week, I put together a comprehensive file on their financial situation. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence of their desperation and poor decisions. I organized it all in a 3-ring binder with tabs and photocopies of everything. Their foreclosure papers, David's bankruptcy filing, Crystal's collection notices, the failed business registration documents, tax liens, court judgments, Everything that painted the picture of a family in complete financial freefall who thought they could solve their problems by stealing from me. Then I started making some very strategic phone calls, each one carefully planned for maximum impact. First, I contacted their mortgage company and the bank handling their foreclosure. I sent a detailed letter explaining the attempted fraud, including documentation of David's unauthorized calls to my mortgage company, claiming to be my representative, evidence of their attempts to manipulate me into transferring my property to help them avoid foreclosure, and records of their business failures that had led to their current situation. I explained that they had used a stolen key to break into my house and attempt to move David's family in without permission, all as part of a scheme to use my mortgage payments to save their own house. The letter was professional but thorough, laying out exactly how they'd attempted to commit fraud and how their actions demonstrated they were not operating in good faith with their lender. I included copies of the police report from when I'd had them removed from my house, documentation of David's bankruptcy that should have been reported to the court, and evidence of their deliberate deception about their financial situation. 3 days later, I got a call from a fraud investigator at the bank asking me to come in and give a formal statement to their legal team. Apparently, attempting to fraudulently transfer property to avoid foreclosure was something they took very seriously, especially when it involved lying to multiple financial institutions. Second, I called the bankruptcy court clerk's office and spoke to someone in the trustee's office about David's case. David's Chapter 7 discharge had included a requirement to report any significant changes in his financial situation for 3 years after filing. Attempting to take over a house payment definitely counted as a significant change that should have been reported to the court. The fact that he'd been calling my mortgage company and investigating loan assumptions without reporting this to the bankruptcy court was a violation of his discharge agreement. I provided them with documentation of David's calls to my mortgage company, evidence of his attempts to take over my house payments, and records showing he'd been planning this for weeks without proper disclosure. The clerk informed me that bankruptcy fraud was a federal crime, and that they would be reopening his case for review. Third, I may have mentioned to a few people in the community that David was looking for work and seemed really desperate for money, to the point where his family was making some questionable decisions. Word travels fast in small towns, and reputation matters when you're job hunting. I wasn't spreading lies. Everything I mentioned was completely true, but I made sure the right people heard about his character and reliability issues. I spoke to the manager at the hardware store where David had applied for work, mentioning that I'd heard he was having some legal troubles related to bankruptcy fraud. I talked to my neighbor who worked at the auto parts store, casually mentioning that my brother was struggling with some honesty issues and making poor decisions that affected his family. Nothing malicious, just concerned family members sharing factual information about someone's character. But the most satisfying call was to my mom's church. I spoke to the church secretary and mentioned that some longtime members of the congregation were facing serious financial difficulties and had been making some questionable decisions lately. I suggested they might benefit from financial counseling and perhaps some assistance from the church's emergency fund, and provided names and details about their situation. I explained that my parents had been involved in some concerning behavior, including attempted property fraud and breaking into family members' homes. I mentioned that they'd been lying to church members about their financial situation while asking for help with legal fees. I suggested that the church might want to look into the situation more carefully before providing any assistance, since there seemed to be some dishonesty involved in how they were presenting their circumstances. The secretary thanked me for the information and said they would definitely be following up with the family to better understand their situation and provide appropriate guidance. Within 2 weeks, the consequences started rolling in like dominoes. My parents' foreclosure was accelerated due to the fraud investigation. They went from having a month to save their house to having 2 weeks to vacate. David's bankruptcy case was reopened for review based on his attempted assumption of debt that he'd never reported to the court. The church started asking uncomfortable questions about my parents' financial situation, their business dealings, and their attempts to involve the pastor in what was essentially a property dispute. Several potential employers in town started asking questions about David's background and reliability after hearing concerns about his character from community members. 3 weeks after I'd started my research and documentation campaign, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was small and defeated. "Alex." It was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Mom. We need to talk to you. Can you come over, please? I'm pretty busy these days. Please, it's important. It's urgent." I drove over that evening to find their house in complete chaos. Moving boxes everywhere, Crystal crying on the couch while the kids ran around confused, David frantically loading stuff into his Honda like the house was on fire. "What's going on?" I asked. though I already knew exactly what was happening. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. We lost the house, son. Final foreclosure went through yesterday. We have 48 hours to get everything out. That's unfortunate. Where are you planning to go? That's what we wanted to talk to you about. My mom stepped forward, all the fight and superiority completely gone from her demeanor. Alex, we know we made mistakes. We know we handled things badly with your house. But we're family and we need help. What kind of help are you looking for? David stopped loading boxes and turned around, sweat dripping down his face. Dude, we're in serious trouble. Lost the house. The bankruptcy thing got reopened somehow. Crystal's mom won't let us stay there anymore because of some collection agency calling. We've got nowhere to go. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're all adults. Alex, my dad said quietly, his voice shaking. We were wondering, maybe we could stay with you? Just temporarily, until we get back on our feet. I stared at him. Stay with me? In the house you tried to steal from me? We're family, Crystal said through her tears. You have to help us. That's what family does. Actually, I don't have to do anything. David stepped forward, looking defeated. Come on, man. What do you want us to do? Live under a bridge? Sleep in our cars? The kids don't have anywhere to go. I honestly don't care what you do. You created this mess? You can figure out how to get out of it. My mom tried one more time, her voice breaking. Alex, I know we hurt you. I know we made terrible mistakes. But we're sorry. We're really, truly sorry. And we need you. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your plan failed. You're sorry you're facing consequences. But you're not sorry you tried to steal from me. I looked around at all of them, desperate, broke, homeless, and finally understanding that their actions had real consequences. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to clean up the mess you made. You're going to find jobs, real jobs that you actually show up for. You're going to find apartments you can actually afford. You're going to stop expecting other people to bail you out of your bad decisions. And if we don't, David asked, then you'll be homeless, which honestly sounds like a problem you created for yourselves. My dad made one last desperate attempt. Son, please. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. No, I said, heading for the door. Family doesn't try to steal from each other. You guys are just people I happen to share DNA with who turned out to be criminals. Alex, my mom called after me, her voice cracking completely. You can't just abandon us. I turned around one final time. Watch me. That was 8 months ago. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, I've heard bits and pieces about what happened to them since then. My parents moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town, and both got jobs at a discount grocery store. They work opposite shifts, so one of them can always be home with David's kids, since David and Crystal can't afford childcare. David and Crystal moved in with her sister, in a double-wide trailer in a mobile home park outside the city limits. David finally got a steady job working at an auto parts store, but it's minimum wage and they're barely scraping by. Crystal got a job at a fast food restaurant. They're all struggling financially, working jobs they hate, living in places they can't stand, dealing with the stress of poverty, and the shame of their fall from middle-class respectability. Exactly the kind of life they were trying to avoid by stealing my house. Meanwhile, I'm still living in my beautiful house that I bought and renovated myself. I got promoted to senior project manager last month with a $15,000 raise. I'm dating someone incredible, a woman who owns her own accounting firm, has her own house, and has zero interest in anyone else's property or money. Story 5. This story is titled, My Parents Dumped Me in a Foster Home to Travel the World with Their Favorite Daughter, so I became the one they could never afford to face. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey guys, I've been lurking here for a while and wasn't sure if I should post this, but honestly, it's been weighing on me for years. Maybe putting it out there will help me make sense of it all. My name's Adam, and I'm 24 now, but this story starts years ago when I was just 12. Back then, I thought my family was pretty normal. At least, what I thought normal was. We weren't rich, but we had a decent house, decent clothes, and life seemed okay. My parents, Laura and Greg, didn't act like anything was wrong. Well, until it was. Then there was my sister, Emma. Emma was the golden child. You know the type. Teachers loved her, parents couldn't stop bragging about her. If she so much as sneezed, it was treated like a masterpiece. Me? I was just Adam. It wasn't like I was a bad kid or anything, but no matter what I did, it was like I was background noise. Emma got the fridge space for her drawings. I got a pat on the back and a, "That's nice, Adam." And the thing is, I didn't hate Emma for it. It wasn't her fault they treated her like a trophy and me like I didn't matter, but it definitely made me feel like I wasn't important. Anyway, the day it all fell apart started pretty normally. I was in my room, playing with some old action figures I wasn't quite ready to outgrow yet. Then Laura called me downstairs in that weird voice parents use when they're trying to sound calm, but you just know something's up. I figured maybe I'd left the milk out or forgot to do a chore. When I walked into the living room, though, Greg and Laura were both sitting on the couch, looking way too serious for it to be about milk. "Sit down, Adam," Greg said, motioning to the chair across from them. His tone was clipped, like this was a meeting and not a family conversation. Laura, on the other hand, was doing her best to look sympathetic, but something about it felt off. I sat down, baffled. Laura took a deep breath and said, "Adam, we need to talk about something important." My first thought was that someone had died, maybe a grandparent I barely knew. But then Greg said, "We've hit some financial struggles and we can't afford to take care of you anymore." At first I thought I misheard him. Like, what do you mean, can't afford to take care of me? Am I some kind of subscription you're canceling? I just stared at them, trying to process what he'd said. But Laura kept going. "It's not your fault, sweetie. This is something we've been struggling with for a while, and we had to make a really hard decision." A hard decision. Right. They made it sound like they were deciding which cable package to keep, not whether or not to abandon their kid. I asked what they meant, still hoping this wasn't what it sounded like. Laura explained that they'd found a foster home for me, and that it was just temporary. She kept saying that word, temporary, like it was supposed to make me feel better. "Why can't Emma go to the foster home?" I blurted out. I was desperate to understand. Laura's face turned cold for a split second before she said, "Emma's in school, Adam. She needs stability." Stability. Like I didn't? Greg cut in before I could say anything else. "This isn't about choosing one of you over the other. It's about what makes the most sense right now." I started crying, and not the quiet kind. It was ugly, full-on sobbing, because how else does a 12-year-old react to being told his parents are giving up on him? Laura tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, over and over, but all they did was repeat the same rehearsed lines about tough choices and financial struggles. The next day, they packed a small bag for me and drove me to the foster home. The ride there was quiet, not the kind of quiet where people are deep in thought, but the kind where you can feel the tension in every breath. I kept staring at them, hoping one of them would crack, would look back at me and say, "This is a mistake. You're coming back home." But they didn't. When we got to the house, I stayed in the car for a moment, hoping they'd change their minds. Greg turned around and said, "Come on, Adam. Let's get this over with." Like this was some chore he just wanted to check off his to-do list. I stepped out of the car, clutching the duffel bag they'd packed for me. The foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, were standing at the door. They looked friendly enough, but I barely noticed them. All I could focus on was the fact that my parents, were about to leave me there. Laura knelt down in front of me and said, "We love you, Adam. This isn't goodbye forever. Just give it some time, okay?" She kissed my forehead, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like someone was stamping a returned label on me. Greg shook my hand. Not a hug, a handshake, like I was some distant cousin he barely knew, and then they were gone. I stood on the porch, watching their car disappear down the street, my chest getting heavier with each second. I kept thinking, they'll come back. They have to come back. But they didn't. That night, I kept replaying the day in my head. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why Emma and not me? Those questions stuck with me for weeks, and the worst part was, I didn't have any answers. All I had was their promise that this was temporary. And even though I wanted to believe it, deep down, I had this gnawing feeling that I'd never see them again. Looking back, I realized that was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just about them leaving, it was about the way they left, like I was some burden they were relieved to get rid of. But at 12, I didn't have the words to process that. All I knew was that my parents drove away, and I was alone. Over the next few days, the Millers tried to make me feel at home. Mrs. Miller made pancakes for breakfast every morning. Mr. Miller would pop his head into my room every now and then with random trivia. Despite their efforts, I wasn't ready to trust them, or anyone really. My parents had promised me this was temporary, so I held on to that like it was my lifeline. I kept telling myself they'd call, they'd explain everything, and I'd be back home before I knew it. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into years, and not a single word from them. It wasn't until I started school again that the reality of my situation began to sink in. Kids at school noticed I was new, and asked me all kinds of questions. Where are you from? Why'd you move here? I didn't have the energy to explain the truth, so I made up vague answers like, oh, my parents are working in another state for a while. Even saying those words felt bitter in my mouth. One afternoon after school, I was sitting in the Millers' living room, scrolling through my phone and avoiding homework. That's when I made the mistake of looking up my parents online. I didn't even know what I was searching for. Maybe just some kind of sign that they were still thinking about me. What I found instead knocked the wind out of me. There they were, smiling on a beach, the ocean behind them, looking happier than I'd ever seen them. The caption under the photo read, "Finally living our dream life." My stomach churned as I scrolled through their posts. Picture after picture of tropical vacations, fancy dinners, and, of course, Emma. She was in nearly every photo, usually front and center, with captions like "Our amazing daughter." It was like I didn't exist. The more I scrolled, the angrier I got. They'd told me they couldn't afford to keep me, but here they were, living like they were influencers. And Emma, she wasn't in foster care like me. She was still with them, smiling for the camera like everything was perfect. I felt like my head was spinning. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd erased me. What hit me the hardest wasn't just the pictures. It was the travel blog. Yep, they had a whole blog where they detailed their journey to freedom. They wrote about how letting go of material possessions, aka me, had given them clarity. I scrolled down to comments. But this time, something stood out. There was a comment from an account with no profile picture. It read, "Must be nice running away and leaving everything behind. Hope it doesn't catch up to you." I frowned. The words felt sharp, like they were meant to cut through whatever shiny image Greg and Laura were trying to project. My mind raced. What did the commenter mean by leaving everything behind? Were they talking about me? Or something else entirely? I clicked on the comment, but the account was private, and their profile picture was just a blank gray circle. I scrolled further down the page, looking for more. In another photo, one of Laura holding a tropical drink, someone else had written, "Guess skipping town was worth it after all." My chest tightened as I stared at the words. Skipping town? Why would someone say that? I scrolled through more comments, but there was nothing else as pointed as those two. Most people were congratulating them, telling them how inspiring their lifestyle was. I wanted to scream at those people for not seeing through the facade. I couldn't let it go. Were those comments random trolls, or did they know something I didn't? It wasn't like Greg and Laura were strangers to lying. They'd told me they couldn't afford to take care of me, but clearly that wasn't true. Was there more to it? The questions swirled in my head, and I couldn't stop thinking about them. But what could I do? I didn't have access to their past or their secrets. All I could do was stew over those cryptic words and wonder what else they were hiding. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking. It wasn't just about the lies they'd told me. It was about the fact that they didn't even feel guilty. They were out there living their best lives, and I was here trying to figure out how to exist without them. That night at dinner, the Millers noticed something was off. I wasn't exactly subtle about my mood. "You okay, Adam?" Mr. Miller asked, setting his fork down. "Yeah," I mumbled, not wanting to get into it. But Mrs. Miller wasn't the type to let things slide. "You don't have to tell us if you're not ready, but if something's bothering you, we're here," she said gently. I looked at them. These people who barely knew me, but somehow seemed to care more than my own parents ever did. And for some reason, I broke. I told them everything. The blog, the pictures, the captions. I expected them to tell me to stop looking or that it didn't matter, but they didn't. Mrs. Miller just listened, her eyes full of that quiet sympathy I was still getting used to. Mr. Miller, though, looked pissed. "You have every right to be angry," he said, leaning forward. "What they did to you, that's not on you. That's on them. And don't let anyone make you think otherwise." It wasn't a grand speech or anything, but it hit me. For the first time, someone was acknowledging that what had happened wasn't my fault. Over the next few weeks, I started adjusting more to life with the Millers. They weren't perfect, but they were steady. They asked me about my day, helped me with homework, and encouraged me to try new things. I even started opening up at school, joining a couple of clubs and making friends. But the anger I felt toward my parents didn't go away. If anything, it grew. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let their decision define me. So I started joining clubs at school. Not because I suddenly wanted to be the most social kid on the planet, but because I needed to stay busy. I signed up for the debate team first. I figured I was already used to arguing, thanks, Greg and Laura, so why not put that to use? Turns out, I was pretty good at it. Then I got a part-time job. Mr. Miller had been hinting for weeks that I might enjoy some spending money, So I caved and applied to a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved being surrounded by books and people who actually wanted to talk about them. Plus, it gave me a small taste of independence. Every paycheck felt like a step toward building a future that was mine and mine alone. Somewhere along the way, I met Ryan. Ryan treated me like a normal kid, not a charity case. When I told him about my parents, he just nodded and said, "That's messed up, man. Wanna play video games?" One afternoon, I came home from school to find the house unusually quiet. Normally, Mrs. Miller would be in the kitchen humming along to some oldies playlist, while Mr. Miller tinkered with something in the garage. But this time, I heard hushed voices coming from the dining room. I paused in the hallway, just out of sight, straining to hear. "Should we tell him?" That was Mrs. Miller's voice, low and uncertain. "He has a right to know," Mr. Miller replied. "If it's about him, we can't keep it a secret. It'll just upset him. He's doing so well right now," she argued. I took a step closer. "What were they talking about?" "We should at least wait until we know more," Mrs. Miller continued. "This letter doesn't explain much. It could be nothing." I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. A letter? About me? Before I could figure out how to ask without sounding like I was eavesdropping, Mr. Miller sighed. "Fine, we'll wait. But if they contact us again, we have to come clean." I heard footsteps heading toward the living room and quickly ducked into the kitchen, pretending I just walked in. Mrs. Miller smiled when she saw me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I crept into the dining room. I knew I shouldn't snoop, but I couldn't help myself. On the table was a stack of mail, and near the bottom, I spotted an envelope with my name on it. I hesitated before picking it up. The return address was from a law office. My stomach turned as I opened it, scanning the first few lines. "To whom it may concern, this is a notice regarding unresolved debts associated with Gregory and Laura. As the listed guardians of Adam, we request any relevant documentation regarding the family's financial situation during—" I stopped reading, my hands shaking. Debts? Was this what Greg and Laura had been running from? Had they dumped me not because they couldn't afford me, but because they couldn't face their own mistakes? I stuffed the letter back into the envelope and put it back on the stack, trying to look like I hadn't touched it. My mind was racing. I didn't know what to do with this information, but one thing was clear. Greg and Laura had been lying about more than just their financial struggles. By the time I turned 16, things were starting to click. I'd been working hard in school, balancing my job and extracurriculars, and it was paying off. My grades were solid, and my debate coach told me I had a real shot at getting a scholarship. That was the first time I let myself imagine a future that didn't involve my parents or their baggage. It felt good, liberating even. Then, the scholarship became real. I still remember the day I got the letter. I'd applied on a whim, thinking there was no way I'd actually get it. When I opened the envelope and saw the words, "full ride," I couldn't believe it. I ran downstairs to show the Millers, who were practically glowing with pride. Mrs. Miller hugged me so tight, and Mr. Miller kept saying, "I knew it. I knew you could do it." That night, I decided to share the news on social media. I wasn't big on posting personal stuff, but this felt like a moment worth celebrating. I wrote something short and sweet about how hard work pays off and how grateful I was for the support I'd gotten. The comments started rolling in almost immediately. Friends from school, teachers, even random classmates I barely knew. But there was one comment that made my stomach drop. It was from Laura. "We're so proud of you, Adam. Let's reconnect soon." Proud of me? After everything? I stared at the comment for what felt like forever, my anger bubbling to the surface again. It wasn't just that they commented, it was how casual it was. Like we were just distant relatives who'd lost touch, not parents who had completely abandoned their son. I didn't respond. What could I even say? Instead, I deleted the comment and blocked them both. That was the moment I realized I didn't need their approval, or their guilt trips. The scholarship gave me a new sense of purpose. I threw myself even harder into my studies, determined to prove to myself, and maybe a little to them, that I could succeed without their help. Mr. Miller started giving me mini financial literacy lessons, which I actually found interesting. He showed me how to save, budget, and think about long-term goals. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical, and it gave me a sense of control I'd never had before. With their encouragement, I also started tutoring younger students after school. It wasn't something I'd ever seen myself doing, but it turned out I had a knack for explaining things in a way that made sense. Plus, it felt good to help kids who were struggling, especially since I knew what it was like to feel left behind. One day, during one of our tutoring sessions, Ryan asked me what my ultimate goal was. Like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" he said. leaning back in his chair like it was the most casual question in the world. I thought about it for a second before answering. I just want to be stable, you know? Like, have my own place, my own life, and not feel like I'm relying on anyone else. That's solid, he said with a grin. But don't forget to have some fun along the way. Ryan's words stuck with me. I realized I'd been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't left much room for anything else. So I made a promise to myself to find a balance. I kept working hard, but I also started saying yes to things I'd usually avoid. Game nights with friends, spontaneous road trips, even just hanging out at the park on a lazy Sunday. It wasn't much, but it reminded me that life didn't have to be all grind and no joy. By the end of that year, I felt like a completely different person. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The Millers had become my rock. Ryan was like a brother, and I finally felt like I was on a path that was entirely my own. My parents' absence still stung sometimes, but it didn't define me. If anything, it fueled me to keep moving forward. Then things took a different turn once my graduation day rolled in. It was supposed to be the culmination of everything I'd worked for. It was the day I was finally going to stand up, surrounded by the people who supported me, and say, I made it. The weeks leading up to graduation were a blur. I barely had time to think. The Millers were buzzing with excitement, making plans for a small celebration at their house afterward. Even Ryan, who normally shrugged off anything sentimental, seemed genuinely hyped for me. I still remember the morning of graduation like it was yesterday. My mind kept racing with thoughts about everything it had taken to get here, from the moment my parents left me on the Millers' porch to all the nights I stayed up studying just to prove to myself I could do it. I thought about it all. Mrs. Miller had ironed my graduation gown the night before, leaving it hanging on my bedroom door with a little note that said, "So proud of you, Adam." I smiled when I saw it. It wasn't just the note, it was everything they'd done for me over the past 5 years. They weren't just foster parents anymore. They were my real family. The ceremony itself was exactly what you'd expect. When my name was called, I walked across the stage to grab my diploma, and for a brief moment, it felt like time stopped. The crowd was cheering, and I could hear the Millers and Ryan shouting my name like I was a rock star. It was everything I'd hoped for. But of course, nothing in my life ever stays perfect for long. After the ceremony, we gathered outside to take pictures. The Millers were beaming, and Ryan was making dumb jokes about how my diploma was probably written in crayon. Emma had even shown up, which was a surprise since she usually kept to herself. It felt like my world was exactly as it should be, until I saw them. Standing at the edge of the crowd were Greg and Laura. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I hadn't seen them in years, and I definitely hadn't invited them. But there they were, dressed like they'd just walked off a cruise ship, scanning the crowd like they were looking for something, or someone. I tried to ignore them, hoping they'd leave once they realized I wasn't going to acknowledge them. But Greg caught my eye, and before I could turn away, he started walking toward me, dragging Laura along behind him. My chest tightened as they approached, their faces plastered with fake smiles. "Adam," Laura said, her voice way too chipper for someone who abandoned their kid. "You look so grown up." Greg clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends catching up. "We're so proud of you, son. This is such a big day for all of us." All of us? The audacity of that statement made me laugh. I stared at them, unsure if I should scream, cry, or walk away. The Millers and Ryan were standing a few feet away, clearly confused but not wanting to intervene. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. "We came to celebrate with you," Greg said, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "We've made mistakes, Adam, but we always wanted the best for you." Laura chimed in, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "We've missed you so much. We thought this would be the perfect time to reconnect as a family." "You don't get to call yourselves my family," I said. "You abandoned me. You left me with strangers and didn't even bother to check if I was okay. And now you want to show up like none of that happened?" Laura's smile faltered, and Greg's face turned red. "That's not fair, Adam," Greg said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We did what we thought was best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I shot back. "You mean best for you. Don't stand here and act like you did this for me. You were living your dream life while I was trying to figure out how to survive without you." By now, people were starting to notice. The Millers stepped closer, their faces a mix of concern and anger. Emma surprised me the most. She walked right up to Greg and Laura and said, "You don't get to ruin this for him. You've done enough." It was the first time I'd ever seen her stand up to them, and I couldn't have been prouder. Greg tried to argue, but Laura tugged on his arm, whispering something about causing a scene. They both looked at me one last time, their faces a mix of frustration and pity, before turning and walking away. The Millers were quick to jump in, wrapping me in a hug and reminding me that today was about my achievements, not their drama. Ryan handed me a tissue, muttering something about how I should charge them for emotional damages, which actually made me laugh. The rest of the day was a blur. We went back to the Miller's house where they decorated the backyard with streamers and balloons. And for a few hours, I let myself forget about Greg and Laura and just enjoyed being surrounded by the people who truly mattered. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with Emma. She looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They manipulated us while they only care about themselves." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We sat there in silence for a while. I felt like Emma and I were on the same page, and that was enough. That day wasn't just about graduation. It was about finally standing up for myself and cutting ties with the people who had tried to drag me down. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. But I knew my parents weren't done yet. Their sudden contact with me, the way they are insisting on coming back into my life after all these years, made me feel that there was something off, and I couldn't be more right. A week after graduation, I got an email from Laura. At first, I thought it might be an apology, though deep down I knew better. It was long, filled with half-truths and excuses. She wrote about how hard things had been for them, how they'd made mistakes but always had my best interests at heart. Then she hit me with, "We hope we can move past this and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well, and we're proud of you. Maybe you could help us out during this tough time?" Help them out. After everything they'd done, or more accurately, not done, they had the nerve to ask me for help. It was laughable in a way that wasn't funny at all. I didn't respond. I deleted the email and blocked their address, but the anger lingered like an unwelcome guest. Emma had been keeping tabs on them, more out of curiosity than anything else. She filled me in on their latest antics. They'd burned through their savings trying to maintain the image of their so-called dream life, and that they cannot afford. The travel blog had flopped, leaving them with nothing but debt and bad credit. They'd sold off most of their belongings and were couch surfing with distant relatives who, according to Emma, were starting to lose patience with them. "They're a mess," Emma said one night during a call, "but they're still blaming you for everything. They think if you just forgive them, everything would magically fix itself." "Forgive them for what? Making me homeless at 12? I snapped, the bitterness coming through in my voice. Emma sighed. "I'm not saying they're right, Adam. I'm just telling you what they're saying. Their downfall wasn't something I celebrated, but I couldn't say I felt bad for them either. They made their choices, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward. One afternoon, I got a notification on my phone that left me speechless. Greg and Laura had found me on LinkedIn. They'd left a comment on a post I'd made about my upcoming scholarship. "We're so proud of you, Adam. Let's catch up soon." It was almost identical to the comment they'd left on my graduation post. I didn't even know they knew how LinkedIn worked. I blocked them immediately, but it wasn't enough. They started messaging people in my network. Co-workers, professors, even the Millers. The messages were all the same. A mix of guilt-tripping and outright lies about how I'd abandoned them. One of the messages reached my boss at the bookstore, who pulled me aside one day to ask what was going on. "Look, I don't want to pry," she said, "but someone claiming to be your parents sent us an email. It was weird." I was mortified. "I'm so sorry," I said. "They're not really part of my life. I'll handle it." To her credit, my boss didn't press me for details. She just nodded and said, "Well, if they bother us again, let me know. We've got your back." Hearing that was a relief, but it also made me realize just how far Greg and Laura were willing to go. It wasn't enough for them to invade my personal life. They were trying to sabotage my professional one too. Emma stepped in around this time, posting a public statement on her social media calling them out. She didn't hold back, detailing how they'd abandoned both of us and refused to take responsibility for their actions. "Adam and I have worked hard to rebuild our lives without their support," she wrote. "We don't owe them anything." Her post went viral, with hundreds of people commenting in support. While it was validating to see so many strangers siding with us, it also escalated the situation. Greg and Laura started lashing out, posting their own dramatic rants about how we were ungrateful and how they'd sacrificed so much for us. Their posts were full of half-truths and outright lies, but the more they talked, the more people saw through them. Then Emma called me, her voice unusually excited. "You remember that old storage unit they had? Turns out they stopped paying for it, and the landlord let me grab a few things before clearing it out." An hour later, she showed up at my place with a battered cardboard box. You need to see this, she said, dropping it on the table. Inside, I found a folder stuffed with paperwork, unpaid bills, foreclosure notices, and letters from collections agencies. My stomach sank as I flipped through them. They were living way beyond their means, Emma said bitterly. Failed businesses, maxed out credit cards. Looks like they ran instead of facing it. Near the bottom of the stack, a letter from their lawyer caught my eye. It mentioned restructuring finances and reducing dependence to streamline expenses. My name was right there, listed like a liability. I slammed the folder shut, my hands shaking. They didn't leave because they couldn't afford me, I said quietly. They left because it was easier than cleaning up their mess. Emma stayed silent for a moment before saying, I thought you deserved to know. Thanks, I muttered. After she left, I stared at the folder, torn between burning it and keeping it as proof. In the end, I kept it. Not for them, but for me. By the time I started college, their reputation was in shambles. People were flagging their crowdfunding campaigns as fraudulent, and even the relatives they'd been staying with had kicked them out. According to Emma, they were living out of their car, still clinging to the idea that I owed them something. Meanwhile, I was thriving. College was everything I'd hoped it would be, and I was determined to make the most of my scholarship. I also started a small side hustle, teaching financial literacy workshops on campus. It wasn't anything fancy, but it felt good to give back, especially knowing how much the Millers had taught me about managing money. One day, during my second semester, I got a call from Emma. You're not going to believe this, she said, her tone equal parts frustration and disbelief. They showed up at my apartment. What? I asked, my chest tightening. They were crying, Adam, begging me to convince you to talk to them. They said they're desperate. I sighed, rubbing my temples. What did you say? I told them to leave. I said if they showed up again, I'd call the police. I didn't know whether to feel angry or relieved. Part of me hated that they were still trying to drag Emma into their mess. But another part of me was proud of her for standing her ground. She'd come a long way from the quiet girl who used to avoid conflict at all costs. I didn't owe them my forgiveness, my money, or my time. What I owed to myself, to keep building the life I wanted, free from their influence. But of course, Greg and Laura weren't done with me. They weren't the kind of people to let go, especially not when they thought there was something in it for them. It started with the calls, random numbers popping up on my phone at all hours of the day. I usually ignored them, but one day I made the mistake of answering. It was my Aunt Karen, a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't waste any time. Adam, what is wrong with you? She snapped before I could even say hello. Excuse me, I said, caught completely off guard. Your parents are struggling, living in their car, and you're just ignoring them like they don't exist? They're your family, Adam. You owe them at least a little kindness. I bit back the urge to laugh. Kindness? Did they show me kindness when they dropped me off at a foster home and never looked back? Did they show me kindness when they left me to fend for myself at 12? Karen huffed, clearly not expecting me to push back. They were doing what they thought was best. People make mistakes, Adam. You're being heartless. I hung up. I wasn't about to waste my energy explaining myself to someone who clearly had no idea what I'd been through. Or worse, didn't care. Over the next few weeks, similar calls trickled in from distant relatives, most of whom hadn't bothered to reach out to me in years. It was the same script every time. I was the ungrateful son, the selfish one who couldn't forgive his poor parents. What none of them seemed to understand was that Greg and Laura weren't just bad parents. They were toxic, manipulative, and entirely unwilling to take responsibility for their actions. Helping them would only drag me back into a mess I'd fought so hard to escape. When the calls didn't work, Greg and Laura took things to the next level. One day, I got an email from a lawyer representing them. The subject line alone made my stomach turn. Notice of intent to pursue financial support. I opened it, skimming the legal jargon that basically boiled down to this. They were suing me for financial abandonment. According to the email, they believed I was obligated to support them now that I was successful. It was laughable. First of all, I wasn't some millionaire. Sure, I was doing well, but I was still in the early stages of my career. Second, I'd been in foster care. Legally, I owed them nothing. I forwarded the email to a lawyer the Millers had connected me with, who reassured me it was an empty threat. They don't have a case, she said. They're trying to scare you into giving them money. Don't engage. It was good advice, but it still left a bad taste in my mouth. The idea that they could twist the story, that they could make me out to be the bad guy after everything they'd done, felt like salt in the wound. But instead of stewing over it, I poured my energy into my work. By now, my financial literacy workshops had grown into something much bigger. What had started as a side hustle was now a full-fledged organization, helping young adults across the country learn how to manage their money and build their futures. I'd partnered with nonprofits, schools, and even some big-name companies. Every success felt like a step further from the person I'd been when Greg and Laura left me behind. Recently, I got an email from a producer who had heard about my story through one of my nonprofit partners. They were working on a series about resilience and wanted to feature me. At first, I was hesitant. Did I really want to put my story out there for the world to see? But after talking it over with the Millers and Emma, I decided to go for it. If sharing my journey could help even one kid in foster care feel less alone, it would be worth it. The filming process was surreal. At one point, they asked if I wanted to include anything about Greg and Laura. I thought about it for a long time before deciding to mention them briefly. Not to shame them, but to give context to my journey. They made their choices, I said during one of the interviews. And those choices shaped me in ways I never expected. But they don't define me. My life now, the family I've built, the work I do, that's what matters. But during one of the filming breaks, the producer pulled me aside, looking hesitant. "Hey, Adam," she started. "We found something during our research. It's about your parents. Are you okay hearing it?" I raised an eyebrow. At this point, I'm not sure anything could shock me, but go ahead. She took a deep breath before continuing. It turns out they were evicted after defaulting on several loans. There's also a history of unpaid bills and, this is where it gets messy, potential fraud accusations. It looks like they skipped town to avoid legal trouble. I stared at her. Fraud accusations? The words felt heavy, like they were sinking in slow motion. She nodded. It wasn't major, at least not on the surface, but there's a pattern. Failed business ventures, sketchy credit card activity, and attempts to secure loans they had no way of paying back. They left a lot of people hanging. The anger I thought I'd buried flared up again. So they weren't just selfish, they were actively screwing people over and ran when it caught up to them? The producer gave me a sympathetic look. It seems that way. I thought you should know, in case it comes up later. I nodded, though my mind was spinning. Their lies had always felt personal, like they were just about me. But knowing they'd left a trail of destruction behind them made it even worse. Each and everything about them made me confirm that they'd abandoned me because it was convenient, a way to cut their losses and start fresh. However, when the documentary premiered, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who had grown up in similar situations, thanking me for sharing my story. Some said it gave them hope. Others just said it made them feel seen. It was humbling in a way I wasn't prepared for. Greg and Laura, predictably, tried to use the documentary to their advantage. They went on social media, posting long, dramatic rants about how I'd painted them as villains, and how they were the real victims. It didn't work. If anything, it backfired. People who saw the documentary started calling them out, pointing out the holes in their stories and questioning their motives. Their attempts to regain sympathy only solidified their reputation as manipulative and selfish. Meanwhile, I bought my first home, a cozy place in a quiet neighborhood where I could finally feel like I belonged. I invited the Millers and Emma over for a housewarming dinner, and we spent the night laughing, eating too much, and reminiscing about how far we'd come. Emma had been thriving too. She'd graduated from college and was starting her own career, free from the shadow of Greg and Laura. Honestly, I don't regret the decisions I made. Cutting ties with Greg and Laura wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My success came from the Millers, Emma, and the family I built. Not blood, but the people who showed up. And that's all that matters. At the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who helps you become the best version of yourself. And the family I chose? They were everything I could have ever hoped for. Story 6. My dad left a voicemail. "Don't bother coming. We're cutting ties." I texted back, "Understood." Then I quietly pulled my name from the business loan. They thought they could count on my brother. 1 week later, they were all panicking. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit. I spent 15 years building my father's company. One day he left me a voicemail. "Don't bother coming. We're cutting ties." Then he handed my role to my brother. I didn't argue. I just walked away, took what's mine, and watched everything collapse. They backed the wrong horse. Here's how it happened. My 35 male dad Started his equipment supply business out of a storage unit in Houston back in the 80s. 3 decades later, it was doing $4.2 million in revenue out of a 50,000 square foot facility in North Dallas. I'd put in 15 years, first learning inventory during high school summers, then operations after college, and finally modernizing the whole back-end system 4 years ago. The business was solid Texas stock, industrial equipment for oil fields, construction sites, and manufacturing plants, high-end generators, specialized hydraulic systems, custom fabrication equipment, the kind of gear that keeps the Texas economy running, but nobody outside the industry ever thinks about. Our client list included most of the major players in the state's energy sector. Dad never missed a chance to remind everyone he built it from nothing, despite the $80,000 loan from my grandfather that he never paid back. He conveniently left that part out of his bootstrapping story. In today's money, that's around $200,000 of startup capital he got for free. Not exactly the self-made narrative he pushed. My brother, 27 male, Damien, was a different story. While I was counting inventory on 102-degree warehouse days, he was at SMU, then wasting time in Europe networking. Mom and Dad paid for everything: tuition, apartment, car. The convertible BMW he wrecked sophomore year was replaced within a week. When he finally joined the business 4 years ago, Dad gave him a VP title despite having zero experience. Mom was always his biggest defender. When Damien totaled that BMW, it was her who convinced Dad to replace it immediately. She needs reliable transportation for networking events, she'd insisted, while I was driving a 10-year-old Camry with 180,000 miles that I'd paid for myself. She never pushed for me the way she did for him. Damien majored in communications, which basically meant he spent 4 years partying and making connections with other rich kids. His resume consisted of one summer internship at a marketing firm where his college roommate's dad was the CEO. Yet somehow, Dad thought he was qualified to run sales at a multi-million-dollar industrial equipment company. I still remember the day Damien first showed his true colors at work. We'd landed a major oil company contract, and I'd spent 6 months setting up the logistics and building a custom inventory system for their specific needs. We're talking 3 a.m. nights, weekends sacrificed, my girlfriend at the time breaking up with me because I was married to the job. On the day of the final presentation to their procurement team, Damien waltzed in 20 minutes late, took over my PowerPoint, and then introduced himself as the architect behind this partnership. When the client asked a technical question about implementation timelines, Damien fumbled, so I jumped in with the answer. Later that day, he cornered me in the warehouse. "Don't ever make me look bad in front of clients again," he said, jabbing his finger at my chest. "I just answered their question," I replied. "Next time, write it down and pass me a note. I'm the face of sales now. You're the back-end guy. Know your place." I should have quit that day. Instead, I swallowed my pride and kept working, telling myself I was doing it for the company my dad built, not for Damien's ego. The oil company contract ended up being worth $1.7 million in the first year alone. But guess whose name was on the commission paperwork? Not mine. Last year, I found proof Damien was inflating his commission numbers. He'd take credit for renewals that were automatic, claim deals that other sales guys had closed, and even create phantom leads that magically converted last minute to hit quarterly targets. I showed Dad the evidence, a spreadsheet comparison that took me a week to compile, and he brushed it off as how business gets done in Texas. I'd spent the last 2 quarters quietly documenting everything, building my case, keeping receipts. I wasn't planning to use any of it, but something told me to be prepared. Call it instinct from 15 years of watching my dad operate. Then one day, I noticed my dad's missed call. It was 6:42 p.m. on a Thursday, and I'd just closed our biggest deal of the quarter, without Damien's help. We weren't exactly the daily check-in type of family, so I figured it had to be something about the quarterly numbers. I hit play on the voicemail and continued packing up my stuff, half listening as I shoved my laptop into its case. "Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties." I froze, one hand still on my laptop zipper. 7 words, delivered in the same flat tone he'd used to cancel a lunch meeting. I stood there for a minute, his voice echoing in my head. The message was cold and efficient, like terminating a contract. After all the years I'd put into the family business, all the weekends I'd sacrificed, all the personal relationships I'd put on hold to help build his empire, this is how he ends it? A voicemail? The family reunion was our annual thing at my dad's ranch in the hill country. Been happening since I was a kid. It wasn't just a family gathering. It was also when we discussed the business direction for the coming year, hash out major decisions, and set compensation. Cutting me out of that was cutting me out of the business. Through my office window, I could see Damien in Dad's office, both of them looking at paperwork, nodding. Dad never consulted with me that way anymore. Now it all made sense. They weren't just planning next quarter, they were planning my exit. I picked up my phone, my thumbs hovering over the screen. A dozen replies ran through my mind, each one angrier than the last. But finally, I just typed a single word. Understood. If he wanted to end things, fine. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. But if he thought he could cut me out without consequences, he had another thing coming. I reached down and pulled out the thick, leather-bound ledger from my bottom drawer. There was my name and neat signature in black ink next to my parents'. With a slow, deliberate stroke, I crossed my name off. The sound of the pen cutting through the paper felt like a physical act of separation. I took a photo of the modified document with my phone, then opened my email and wrote a message to my personal lawyer. I attached the photo and typed, "Need to talk tomorrow. Family business situation changing. Let's discuss options." I hit send, locked my office door, and walked out of the building without looking back. If my father wanted to play this game, I wasn't going to let him hold my future hostage. The next day, I acted fast, canceled my flight to the Hill Country Ranch where the reunion was happening, erased the date from my calendar, and sent an email to my parents confirming my intention to step away from the business and requesting a full financial audit. No pleasantries, no attempts to patch things up, just the cold, clear language of a businessman walking away from a bad deal. 15 years of my life in that company. 15 years of missed vacations, canceled dates, and postponed plans. For what? To be cut out with a 7-word voicemail? I'd given up a job offer at Amazon's logistics division after college to help Dad expand the business. And for what? So Damien could waltz in and take over? I quietly pulled my name from the business loan documents where I was listed as a guarantor. This wasn't an emotional decision, it was pure risk management. If they were cutting me out. Made a few calls to my lawyer to initiate the separation process. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. My dad taught me that business is business. I was just applying his lesson. While I waited for my lawyer to call back, I backed up every relevant document I had access to. Financial reports, client lists, vendor contracts, anything that might be useful if things got ugly. Not to steal, but to protect myself. When you've spent 15 years building systems, you know exactly where the bones are buried. An hour after I sent my email, Damien texted me. "Always knew you'd bail when things got tough. Don't worry, I've got plenty of ideas to fix your outdated systems. Bet Dad wishes he'd put me in charge years ago." I didn't respond. No point adding fuel to the fire. I just took a screenshot from my records and kept working on my exit strategy. Damien had always been a talker, not a doer. His ideas typically involved spending money we didn't have on consultants we didn't need. The next morning, I got a text from Matthew, one of the warehouse managers who'd been with us for a decade. "Your dad just called an emergency meeting. Announced Damien's taking over your position effective immediately." The guy couldn't tell a circuit breaker from a fuse box if his life depended on it. Apparently, Damien had been telling Dad I was planning to start my own competing business and stealing client information for months. Complete bullshit. But Damien had always had Dad wrapped around his finger. I spent that night copying all relevant files to my personal storage, taking screenshots of admin access pages, and documenting everything I'd built or implemented. I knew exactly how this would play out. 36 hours later, my phone lit up with a tidal wave of missed calls. 78 from my mother alone, dozens more from my sister, and a handful from my father. I scrolled through the panicked texts, frantic voicemails, and increasingly desperate emails. My father's messages started with cautious, probing questions, like someone testing thin ice. But as the hours passed and my silence grew longer, they became more urgent. His words tinged with something I hadn't heard in his voice in years. Fear. "Hugo, you need to call me about the credit line paperwork. It's important. Son, we can discuss it like men. Call me back. Hugo, this isn't a game. The company's at stake here." His accountant, a humorless man from Austin I never liked, left a message that crackled with anxiety. "Hugo, we need to talk urgently. The credit line is in jeopardy without your signature." I leaned back in my chair and let a slow smile cross my face. I'd given them a head start, but now the storm had hit, and I was just getting started. See, what my dad and Damien didn't realize was that 4 years ago, when I modernized our entire business infrastructure, I'd made myself essential to the operation. Not intentionally, I'd actually documented everything meticulously, but some things you just can't transfer in a day. Things like the personal relationships I'd built with our main suppliers, the custom code that kept our inventory system running, and the specialized knowledge of our clients' needs that I'd accumulated over years. By the third day, The messages had gone from confused to desperate. My mother's voicemails were breathless pleas, her words tumbling over each other. My sister Ariel tried a softer approach. Hey, Hugo. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Let's talk. I didn't answer. Ariel meant well, but I knew my dad too well to think this was just a misunderstanding. On the fourth day, I got an email from the bank that runs our family business accounts. I opened it cautiously, bracing myself for whatever new disaster my parents had cooked up. As I scanned the document, my jaw dropped. My father and Damien had quietly tried to transfer all the remaining funds into a separate account in their names only. They'd even initiated the paperwork to dissolve the original LLC, effectively cutting me out of the picture entirely. The only reason the bank flagged it was because my name was still on some of the original documents, and my signature was required for major financial changes per our operating agreement. An agreement I'd insisted on when we restructured 4 years ago, a detail Dad had probably forgotten about in his rush to push me out. That was it. My dad wasn't just trying to break up the family. He and Damien were trying to cut me off completely, cleanly, for good. They probably thought I'd be too stunned or hurt to act. They didn't realize that by crossing that line, they'd given me the perfect excuse to hit back. I took a deep breath, then called my lawyer. We had a long, intense conversation, and by the end of it, the wheels were in motion for something much bigger than just removing my name from a business loan. They've made this easy for us, my lawyer said. Attempted financial fraud is pretty straightforward. But are you sure you want to go this route? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. I didn't hesitate. I'm sure. They started this war. I'm just making sure I win it. The next morning, I pulled together every scrap of paper I had on the family business. I spent hours compiling a comprehensive dossier, highlighting every shady move, every questionable expense, every suspicious transaction my father and brother had ever made. Years of bottled-up frustration fueled my focus. Dad's habit of categorizing personal expenses as business write-offs. Damien's inflated commission reports. The consulting fees paid to my cousin's web design company that never actually delivered a website. The cash deals with certain vendors that mysteriously never appeared in the official books. It was all there, meticulously documented. When I was done, I had a thick, damning stack of evidence. I filed an official complaint with the bank and froze all accounts pending a full audit. I also filed a request with the IRS to investigate possible tax fraud, attaching the most incriminating pieces from my dossier. I didn't know if it would stick, but I was willing to find out. Finally, just for good measure, I sent the whole package to my father's biggest client, a longtime family friend who I knew wouldn't like the idea of being involved in a potentially fraudulent deal. Jim had known my grandfather and had given my dad his first big contract. He was old-school Texas oil money, a man who valued loyalty and straight dealing above all else. I knew he wouldn't take kindly to learning how my father had been operating. I expected retaliation, but I was prepared. I'd already secured all my personal finances, moved my assets to new accounts, and made sure my name was off any company credit lines. Let them come at me. I was no longer exposed. That night, I sat at my apartment window overlooking downtown Dallas, watching the city lights blink on. Part of me felt a twinge of regret about how things had escalated. But another part, the part that remembered every slight, every time Damien was favored, every dismissal of my contributions, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from Matthew at the warehouse. Chaos here today. Your brother tried to access the inventory system and somehow managed to crash the server. Your dad's been yelling all day. Hope whatever's going on works out, man. I smiled grimly. They were learning just how much they'd relied on me, and it had only been 4 days. That night, my phone buzzed again. Ariel. I hesitated before answering. Hugo, I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. But can we talk? Just you and me. I paused, weighing my options. Despite everything, I didn't want to drag her into the middle of this mess. She'd always been the reasonable one, trying to keep things functional when Dad's ego flared up. All right, I finally said. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, I met Ariel at a BBQ joint in North Dallas. She was already there, waiting at a corner table, keeping an eye on the door. When she saw me, she straightened up a bit, but her expression remained serious. Ariel had always been the bridge between me and the rest of the family. 3 years younger than me, 5 years older than Damien, she'd perfected the art of neutrality in family conflicts. Hugo, what's going on? She asked, keeping her voice low. Dad's losing it. Mom's a wreck. They think you're trying to destroy the business. And Damien is just making everything worse, threatening to sue you left and right. She deserved to know the truth, but I didn't want to drag her deeper into the mess. They tried to cut me out completely, I said. Dad and Damien have been moving money into a separate account, trying to dissolve the LLC behind my back. I'm just making sure they can't burn me on the way out. Her eyes widened. That can't be right. Dad wouldn't just... No, there must be some mistake. What about Damien? Would he? I asked pointedly. She looked away, unable to deny it. Damien had always been manipulative, even with her. He'd borrowed money from her college fund once, promising to pay it back but never did. Dad covered it up, of course. I pushed a thin folder across the table. It contained carefully selected pages, just enough to make my point without overwhelming her. Bank transfer requests, questionable invoices, and emails where my father and Damien had explicitly asked their accountant to speed up the separation process. She flipped through the papers. Jesus Christ, this is a lot of money, Hugo. She paused, her fingers tapping a highlighted statement. 75,000 just gone. Yes, I said, leaning back. And that's just the beginning. They've been siphoning off funds for months, maybe years. I caught a transfer of $150,000 to a private account in their names marked Business Development Expenses. I leaned closer. Ariel, if I hadn't reacted when I did, I'd be on the hook for all of it. My name is on those loan documents and tax forms. I could have been legally liable. She closed the folder and pressed her palm flat against it. You have to talk to them, she said firmly. There's got to be another explanation. He's not usually this stupid. And Damien? I asked. She didn't answer. I gave them a chance to explain. You know what Dad did? He left me a 7-word voicemail that broke up the family. Then he put Damien in my position the very next day. Just please don't destroy everything, she said. Mom's already talking about selling the house. If this blows up, I don't know what they'll do. I'm not the one who started this, Ariel. But I promise you, I'm going to finish it. That evening, I got a notice from the bank. The freeze on the company accounts had gone through. My lawyer had leveraged the operating agreement I'd insisted on 4 years ago, the one requiring unanimous member approval for transfers exceeding $50,000, along with evidence of unauthorized transactions. The bank had flagged over $250,000 in suspicious transactions, with several large sums still pending transfer. I pictured my father and Damien in that Austin limestone office, watching the numbers tick down, their carefully built financial empire unraveling by the hour. I wasn't just cutting myself loose. I was setting the whole ship on fire. I knew the business well enough to understand what a frozen account meant. Vendors wouldn't get paid, payroll would be delayed. The line of credit they relied on for major purchases would be jeopardized. It was the corporate equivalent of a heart attack. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing like crazy. My email inbox was flooded with notifications from the bank, my lawyer, and panicked messages from my father's accountant. The audit had come sooner than expected, and it was clearly making waves. I scrolled through the latest updates from the bank. They'd frozen over $400,000 in assets across several accounts and flagged another $200,000 in unexplained withdrawals going back 6 months. It was a financial stranglehold, enough to shut down the business operations completely. My father had left 3 voicemails overnight, each one more desperate than the last. Hugo, son, please. I don't know what you think you know, but you're making a terrible mistake. Call me back immediately. We can work this out. I deleted the messages without responding. An hour later, Ariel called again. Hugo, what did you do? She asked, her voice steady but strained. I did what I had to do, I replied evenly. They're freaking out, Hugo. Dad's talking about lawyers, about pressing charges for sabotage. Mom's in full panic mode, and Damien is making wild promises about fixing everything if they just give him full control. I wasn't surprised. They'd never been good at handling when their plans went sideways. I gave them a chance. Dad made his move, Damien took my position, and I made my countermove. I'm not backing down. There was a long silence on the other end. Fine. Meet with them, she said finally. One last time. For me. I hesitated. I owed Ariel at least that much. All right, I said. But this is the last time. As I hung up, my lawyer called with an update. The bank's preliminary audit had already turned up enough red flags to warrant a more thorough investigation. My father and Damien were looking at potential fraud charges if things kept going this way. You need to decide how far you want to take this, he said. Right now, you've got leverage. They're scared. This might be the time to negotiate a settlement that cuts you loose with your fair share. I considered it. A settlement would be cleaner, faster. But something in me resisted. This wasn't just about money anymore. We met at my parents' house in North Dallas that night. I'd grown up in this house, spent my teenage years in the bedroom upstairs, brought my first girlfriend to dinner at that dining table. Now it felt like enemy territory. My mother opened the door with a forced smile and quick hug. She looked tired. Inside, my father was standing in the living room, arms crossed, looking like he owned the world. Damien sat in the leather chair like it was a throne, legs spread wide, feigning confidence despite the situation. "Sit down," my father demanded. I dropped into a chair, noting how every family photo featured Damien front and center, with me pushed to the side. Had it always been that way? Or was I just noticing it now? "So what's this about?" I asked. My father turned to me, face flushed. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Hugo? Freezing the accounts, getting an audit. You're trying to destroy everything I built." I met his gaze directly. "I'm destroying things? After you tried to cut me out without warning? You think I wouldn't notice $250,000 disappearing into a private account? You think I'm just going to sit back while you and Damien gut the company I helped build?" Damien stood up, pointing at me. "You've always been resentful of Dad's success. You've been trying to undermine me from day one." My father's face hardened. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "I've got deals in the pipeline, investments in place. Damien has relationships with new clients. If you freeze these accounts, it could ruin everything." "That's not my problem," I shot back. "You made your decision when you tried to cut me out of the business and replace me with Damien. I'm just protecting what's mine." There was a long silence. Then Damien leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll modernize the company now that Hugo's out of the way. His systems are ancient. I've got contacts at Oracle who can set us up with real enterprise solutions." I laughed. Damien had never even logged into our inventory system, let alone understood it. "Damien's right," my father said. "We were planning to update the whole operation anyway. This is just accelerating the timeline." I looked at my father and saw something I'd never noticed before. He was scared. Beneath all the blustering and threats, he was terrified that his empire was slipping away. And instead of facing reality, he was doubling down on the fantasy that Damien could somehow save everything. My dad leaned in, voice low and threatening. "Fine. You want to play hardball? You want to burn this family down? I'll show you what it really looks like." I held his gaze. I'd come too far to back down now. Ariel stepped between us. "Stop, all of you. This isn't solving anything." I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "You wanted me here, Ariel. I came. But I'm done trying to reason with them." I turned and walked out, shutting the door firmly behind me. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a new email, a message from my lawyer. My parents and Damien had just filed a lawsuit, claiming I had sabotaged the business and illegally taken control of their accounts. I let out a short laugh and tossed my phone on the passenger seat. So this was how they wanted to play it? Fine. I'd given them a chance to walk away. Now I'd make sure they had nothing left to fight for. The lawsuit hit me harder than expected. My father and Damien had gone nuclear, accusing me of everything from embezzlement to corporate sabotage. Their claims were outrageous, but the stakes were real. If they convinced a judge I'd illegally seized the accounts, I could be on the hook for hundreds of thousands in damages. I'd expected them to be angry, but I hadn't expected them to be this stupid. It was like they were begging to be caught. I spent the next week buried in legal documents, my lawyer working overtime to counter each new motion they filed. They had even dragged Ariel into it, calling her as a witness against me, probably hoping to break my resolve. Then, 2 days before the first court date, I received a message from my father's accountant. "Hugo, we need to meet in private. There are things you need to know." I met him that night at a roadhouse off Interstate 35. He was already there when I arrived, looking nervous. He waved me over, glancing around the room. "Hugo, I shouldn't be here. If they find out..." He nervously adjusted his glasses. "The IRS has been sniffing around some of our filings. With the lawsuit and court-ordered audit, I could be looking at criminal charges for my part in this. I need to get ahead of this." "Just tell me what this is about," I said, sitting across from him. He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Your brother. He's been hiding money for years. Offshore accounts, shell companies, under-the-table cash deals. Your father only found out recently, but he's been covering for him. It's bad. I'd expected some financial misconduct, but this sounded much worse." "How bad?" "Tax evasion, wire fraud, maybe money laundering. I've been cooking the books at their instruction for years, but this lawsuit, if it goes to discovery, we're all exposed. I can't risk my license, my freedom." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything you need is on here. Bank statements, wire transfers, contracts. Your brother has been systematically bleeding the company dry for years, and your father has been helping cover it up. It's enough to sink them both." That night, I reviewed the files. It was all there. Over $750,000 had been quietly siphoned out of the company, with Damien's fingerprints all over it and my father's signature approving most of it. There were equipment purchases that never happened, consulting fees paid to shell companies Damien controlled, and even a fake warehouse lease that was actually funding his condo in South Padre Island. My father had signed off on all of it, either knowingly or in willful ignorance. The next morning, I sent everything to my lawyer with a note. Let's get this over with. By the time the court date arrived, my parents and Damien were backed into a corner. Their accounts were frozen, their business reputation in tatters, and now, with this new evidence, they were staring down potential criminal charges. My father looked older as he entered the courtroom, his usual swagger gone. Damien wasn't even there. He'd apparently gone out of town on business the night before. The judge took less than an hour to rule. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was dismissed, and the court ordered a full forensic audit of my parents' finances and the business. I watched my father's face as reality set in. He hadn't just lost the business. He'd lost everything. Outside the courtroom, he approached me, shoulders slumped. Hugo, you have to believe me. I didn't know how bad it was with Damien. I was just trying to protect him. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You chose him over me, I said quietly. Every time. And now you're paying for it. I walked away, leaving him standing there, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. A week later, Ariel called. She'd found our parents a small apartment in Arlington. She didn't ask for my help, and I didn't offer it. But I sent them enough for 3 months' rent, more for her sake than theirs. Did you know about Damien? He's ruined them, Hugo. And they let him do it. They chose him over you, over me, over everything Dad spent his life building. I could hear the hurt in her voice. It wasn't just me who'd been betrayed. As for the business, it had imploded completely. The audit revealed that Damien had been siphoning money for years. The company was deeply in debt, and most of their major clients had jumped ship when the scandal hit the Dallas business press. The warehouse was shuttered, the equipment sold at auction. Damien had disappeared. Last Ariel heard, he was in Mexico, ignoring their calls, with about $300,000 of the company's money. I signed the final papers dissolving my connection to the business, severing the last financial ties between us. With my settlement money and industry connections, I was already 6 weeks into establishing my own operation in Oklahoma City. Different state, different market, similar industry. I'd secured a modest warehouse space, brought over 2 trusted employees from the Dallas operation, and started building something that was entirely mine. No family drama, no nepotism, just sound business practices. 3 months later, my father called directly. His voice was different, subdued, but still with that undertone of entitlement. Hugo, we need to talk. Your mother and I, we've hit a rough patch. Damien has cleaned us out and disappeared. We were wrong. We need your help to rebuild the business. I let his words hang in the air. Part of me felt vindicated. The other part was just tired of the whole thing. I'm sorry, Dad. That chapter of my life is closed. Come on, son. We have nothing left. We were wrong about you. Wrong about Damien. We can start over, rebuild the business together, the right way this time. I still have connections across Texas. I took a deep breath. Number, you made your choice. Now you have to live with it. I've moved on. Your mother needs her medication. The insurance ... His voice broke for a moment. I felt a twinge in my chest, but quickly suppressed it. He'd been manipulating me for years with guilt. Not this time. I already talked to Ariel about that. She's handling Mom's prescriptions through her clinic. You'll be fine. You can't just abandon your family, Hugo. After all I've done for you. I almost laughed at that. All you've done for me? Dad, I worked 15 years building your company while you handed everything to Damien on a silver platter. I'm done. I hung up and blocked his number. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have them in my life again in some small way. But I would never again tie my future to their judgment or put my financial security in their hands. My father taught me one valuable lesson after all. Business is business. Family is something else entirely. What do you guys think? Did I do the right thing by refusing to help them start over? Edit. Sup guys, it's been a while. Just wanted to let you know an update is coming soon. A lot went down. Stay tuned. Update. Hey again, Reddit. It's been 6 months since my main post, and let me tell you, shit went insane. Yesterday, the Dallas Morning News ran a story about a prominent local businessman's son being arrested in Puerto Vallarta. Yes, that was Damien. Local authorities picked him up at a beachfront condo where he'd been living under a fake name for the past 6 months. He's been extradited back to Texas and charged with wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The DA is talking 15 to 20 years if convicted on all counts. The paper made it sound like he'd been caught during a routine investigation. Like maybe he got sloppy, or someone recognized him, or he pissed off the wrong person down there. He didn't. What the article didn't mention was that his location, evidence of his financial crimes, and a comprehensive paper trail documenting every illegal transaction had been delivered to the FBI, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and Texas Department of Banking exactly 30 days before his arrest. By me. When Damien disappeared to Mexico, I knew the game wasn't over. Half-finished jobs irritate me. Always have. So while my parents were crying to Ariel about their lost fortune, I quietly hired a private investigator in Mexico City who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. Took 2 months and cost me $45,000. But he located Damien living in a $7,000 per month oceanfront condo, driving a new Porsche Taycan, and dating a local restaurant owner. The PI sent me photos of Damien lounging by the pool and laughing like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't destroyed our family business and left our parents destitute. Basic lifestyle surveillance confirmed it was him. The PI got me his alias. He was going by Jack Stevens, his new phone number, and his banking information. From there, I built a comprehensive case. Turned out those offshore accounts the accountant had flagged were just the tip of the iceberg. Damien had been siphoning company funds since day one and had set up an elaborate network of shell companies to hide the money. He'd created fake vendor accounts that charged our company for non-existent services, set up dummy corporations in Nevada and Wyoming to receive consulting fees, even had a fake property management company that supposedly leased equipment to us, equipment we already owned. The full amount was close to $1.2 million, significantly more than the $300,000 my parents initially thought. I didn't do this for justice. I didn't do it to help my parents recover their money. I did it because I finished what I start. When I had everything in place, bank records, transfer confirmations, IP logs from his account logins, even photos of him accessing the accounts from his Mexico hideout, I put together 3 identical packages. One for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, one for IRS Criminal Investigations, and one for the State Banking Commission. Added a detailed timeline, contact information for all relevant witnesses, including our family accountant, who was more than willing to cooperate to save his own skin, and a roadmap for prosecution. Then I sent them certified mail, no return address, and waited. I didn't expect them to move so quickly. Federal agencies typically take their time with white-collar cases, but apparently the evidence was too solid to ignore. Maybe they had him on their radar already for other scams. Either way, they moved. The FBI agent leading the case called me yesterday. Apparently, my name was all over the financial documents as the former operations director, so they wanted a statement. I gave them what they needed. They don't know I was the one who delivered the evidence, and they don't need to. Damien's facing federal charges now. According to his court-appointed attorney, seems like his Mexico money didn't last long enough to hire a decent lawyer, he's trying to make a deal, offering to testify against our father for a reduced sentence. Classic Damien, always looking for the easy way out. Dad will likely face charges too. While he might get a slightly lighter sentence since Damien was the primary architect, at his age, even a 5-year sentence could mean spending his remaining good years behind bars. My parents' remaining assets have been frozen pending the outcome of the case. Ariel says they might lose the apartment I paid for. She asked if I'd help them again. I didn't. The old company is officially dead. Its assets were liquidated months ago. Its reputation buried. My new operation in Oklahoma crossed the $1 million revenue mark last quarter. I've hired good people, implemented solid systems, and built something clean and functional from the ground up. No family drama, no hidden agendas, no Damien. He'll spend years in federal prison wondering who built the case against him. Was it the accountant? A vengeful client? Some random banker who spotted irregularities? It'll eat at him daily, but he'll never know it was me. He'll never know I tracked his every move, documented his crimes methodically, and handed him to the feds on a silver platter. He'll never understand the level of detail and planning that went into his downfall. Some might call it revenge. I just call it closing the loop. As for my parents, they made their choice when they cut me out with that 7-word voicemail. They'll have to live with the consequences. Ariel's still caught in the middle, and I help her when I can. But that chapter with my parents is closed for good. In the end, Damien taught me something too. Always check who's moving pieces behind the scenes. Business is business.